Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Pokémon. Blue Star is also have a Pokémon Master. Chapter 1. Hoo-ha hoo-ha. He was panting rapidly, and his heart was beating violently as if it was about to jump out of his chest. Roar. A violent roar sounded behind him, bursting his eardrums and causing people to panic. Su Yi ran desperately in the forest with lush trees. His modern clothes had been torn into tatters by the branches that were constantly scratched during the run. Some branches slapped his skin, leaving burning marks, but Su Yi had already no time to care. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of heavy footsteps shook the mind like a drum. Behind Su Yi, a huge Tyrannosaurus knocked through the trees blocking the road and rushed toward him menacingly. Death, death, death. Su Yi panicked in his heart while dragging the Tyrannosaurus around the complex tree environment of the forest in order to get rid of it. Roar. Behind it, a Tyrannosaurus with light pink skin and black fur on its back was gradually getting irritated. It roared angrily, and on the sides of its back and near its tail, it suddenly raised two sail-like wing membranes. The nose cap was opened and the nose bones were everted, revealing the high erect nose crown. The huge nostrils sniffed out the scent, locking Su Yi firmly. This is the barbarian jaw dragon. Why did you come to the new world as soon as you woke up? Su Yi took advantage of the barbarian jaw dragon to unfold the heat dissipation film and turned around to take a look, and saw the beast that he had seen countless times in the game, Monster. This also confirmed once again that he did not come to Jurassic World, but the main stage in the game, Monster Hunter World, the new world. This is a world where monsters are rampant, and humans use their various advantages to compete and coexist with monsters, and try to maintain ecological balance. However, Su Yi is not one of those hunters who carry all kinds of exaggerated weapons to fight giant monsters, but an ordinary person living in a peaceful world in the 21st century. Now he is the prey that the barbarian jaw dragon is targeting, but he is bigger than the herbivorous dragons that Barbariosaurus likes to prey on, just need to be able to run a little. The barbarian jaw dragon, which showed a complete hunting posture, roared angrily, stepped back to gather strength, and then suddenly heard a heavy tread on the ground. The barbarian jaw dragon leapt towards Su Yi from a distance. Hearing this movement, the hair on his head stood up for a moment after he had hunted the Barbarignathus countless times in the game. Call. Boom. The 10-ton Tyrannosaurus Rex flew to the ground, and the ground shook violently. The extremely close step immediately disrupted Su Yi's footsteps. He stumbled and fell to the ground, feeling as if he was dead at the same time. Are you going to die inexplicably like this? Su Yi looked up, saw a mouth full of fangs, and smelled the stench from the mouth of the barbarian jaw, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Someone is in danger, meow. A dexterous figure ran past the barbarian jaw dragon. At the same time, a ball of foul-smelling objects in his hand was quickly thrown into the barbarian jaw dragon's mouth that was about to bite Su Yi. Roar. The unpleasant stench and disgusting taste immediately made the barbarian jaw dragon give up biting, shaking its head in discomfort and vomiting. Run, meow. A big cat with cow patterns running on all fours turned its head and motioned for Su Yi to run away with him. Saved. The limbs that were stiff due to fear were filled with strength again. Amid the disgusted roar of the barbarian jaw dragon, Su Yi followed the flexible figure in front of him and ran into the dense forest. Hoo-ho-ho, you can't hear the roar anymore. It should be safe. Su Yi gasped with lingering fear. When he stopped, he felt sore all over and his lungs were burning. We're out of danger for now, meow. The catman, who was less than 1 meter tall, stood up and held up the leather goggles on his head and said, "Thank you, Mau Mau." At this moment, Su Yi had time to thank the cow-colored cat. The cat in front of me who can speak human words is a highly intelligent orc species in Monster Hunter World, and is called a Lu cat by the hunters. These cats have their own culture and society, and have many coat colors and types. They can also engage in production, social interaction, hunting, etc. like humans. The most well-known among hunters is the Elu cat that becomes the follower cat. During hunting, these follower cats can provide hunters with functions such as entangling prey, setting traps, providing replies, helping with collection, etc. They are heroic, dedicated, innocent and cute, and can be said to be good helpers and partners for hunters. In the game, Su Yi, who was just starting out, was attracted by the hatred of cats and saved countless lives by replying to honey bugs. Unexpectedly, when he entered this world, the first person to save him would be this cute cat. Su Yi couldn't help but sigh. How could there be such a cute creature as a Lu cat? This is the real Aibo. Fake Aibo, receptionist, a little expert at opening monsters, a baby Tyrannosaurus Rex. The real Aibo, following cat, can carry and fight, has many methods, and can use all kinds of monsters, ultimate moves. You're welcome, meow, my name is Lucao. By the way, you're probably not a hunter, right? Meow, why did you come to the dangerous ancient tree forest alone, meow? Lucao asked curiously, blinking her watery cat eyes. My name is Su Yi. As for why I came here, I don't know very well. Su Yi said helplessly. Before time travel, he was just an ordinary employee, living a boring and hard job every day. His only interest was playing games, such as Monster Hunter and Pokémon. Thinking carefully about what happened before going to bed, he had just finished a hard day's work and was about to open the NS and play a game for a while. He wanted to take a nap while the game was loading, but he fell asleep just like that. This is often the case. When you become an office worker, you are pressed by countless pressures. Once you relax, even if you want to play games, you no longer have the energy. That's really strange, meow. Su Yi, are you from the Star Stronghold? Which group are you from? It doesn't really look like that. Meow, you are so young. Could it be that you were born in the Star Stronghold, meow? Lu Kao tilted her head and said. You can think of me as a person in distress. Su Yi couldn't help but sigh as he listened to Lu Cao's murmur. Are you from the old continent? Aluma looked left and right at Su Yi, and then his attention was attracted by a book on Su Yi's waist. That book on your waist, meow. It has the logo of the Hunter Guild, meow. Book. Su Yi came to his senses and looked at his waist. Sure enough, a 2-finger-thick ancient book was hung by a lock on his waist. The book seemed to have no weight. He didn't pay attention to it when he ran away before, to its existence. Are these the peripherals I bought? I don't remember that I bought them. Su Yi unbuttoned the buttons and held the book in his hands. In the middle of the book, there is a painting of a blue star pointing the way, and below it is a 5th issue regiment flag with a white streamer and the White Wind logo printed on it. This emblem is not the emblem of the 1st, 23rd, and 4th group, Are you from the rumored 5th group? Lu Kao said, pointing to the White Wind emblem. Su Yi frowned and asked, does the Star Stronghold only have 4 groups sent by the guild now? Of course, meow, but recently, there are rumors in the Stronghold that they are planning to apply to the guild for the arrival of the 5th group members to thoroughly investigate the cause of the Gulong crossing phenomenon, meow. Lu Kao replied. Su Yi thought to himself, is the timeline I am on the time before the arrival of the 5th phase of the game where the protagonist is? And Lu Kao said that there are already rumors about the Star Stronghold applying for the 5th phase of the team to come to investigate, so it should not be long before the main storyline starts. At that time, with the arrival of the 5th phase of the group, the super large ancient dragon Molten Dragon will visit the new world. A series of events will take place as an inducement. In the future, the blue stars will start from the ancient dragon carrying the volcano and trace it to the underworld. The end of the river. The new world and the mystery of Gulongdu, which the guild has spent more than 40 years investigating, are about to come to a conclusion. However, this is not the end. People have seen a broader world, more miracles, and the unknown of the world is still attracting people. It is a story about people following the guidance of the stars to open up a new world with courage and curiosity. Can I also become the White Wind of the new world? Su Yi looked at the blue star in the book that pointed the way, and his heart, which had been flattened and extinguished by modern society, gradually became hot. I am not at the end of the story. But at the beginning of the story, maybe, I can also participate in the legend. Su Yi brought his thoughts back to reality and gently opened the book, only to see a simple interface slowly changing on the simple light yellow pages. The interface is marked with several options: task map, companion beast, ecological report, and item. Currently, only tasks, items, and companion beasts are lit, and the others are unavailable. It is in a dark state, and there is some white space underneath, as if something will be added later. Is it a golden finger? This is too simple, but it would be nice to be simpler, but there is no guidance or anything. Su Yi suddenly became excited. If nothing else, this will be his capital. Accompanying beast. Isn't this the monster hunter? Story Series. Seeing this, Su Yi clicked on this option, and then turned the page of the book. Of course, the interface was blank. As expected, what about the mission? Su Yi exited the interface of the accompanying beast, turned the page back, clicked on the task, the page turned, and the only task appeared on the paper. The beginning of the journey. Get your first partner. Remaining time. 2 days, 1 hour and 30 minutes. You can choose to return immediately or continue exploring after completion. Mission support. Capture 5 balls. Mission reward. 5 captured balls. Hunter basics. What capture ball? Does the Monster Hunter series have this? Su Yi clicked on the item interface. Suddenly, the only item was a red and white ball, with the subscript 5 indicating its quantity. Su Yi's sense of déjà vu became stronger and stronger. He clicked to capture the ball. Suddenly, a ball the size of a table tennis ball appeared in the palm of his hand. There was a protruding button in the middle of the ball. This. Su Yi clicked the button in the middle of the ball, and suddenly, the ball popped and became the size of a palm. Isn't this the elf ball? Su Yi looked left and right. Isn't this the elf ball in Pokémon? What's the meaning? Use Pokéballs to catch monsters and train them into companion beasts. And become a Pokémon Master. Pokémon Legend. Arceus has been teased to be like Monster Hunter, and the battles in the Monster Hunter story series also resemble Pokémon battles. Why does your next Pokémon have to be a Pokémon? Why does your next Monster Hunter have to be a Monster Hunter? Absolutely amazing. Any more instructions? Su Yi found the items in the inventory and checked the instructions, then immediately looked towards the hunting ball. Capture ball. A ball that has a certain chance of capturing monsters. It is best used when the monster is in a bad state. Su Yi was speechless. This looked like the most classic red and white elf ball. Can this thing really catch those wild and ferocious monsters? What are you looking at in front of a blank book, meow? Have you forgotten something, meow? The cat at the side asked in confusion. Su Yi was surprised. Can't you see what's in the book? Aluma's cat eyes widened and she asked in surprise, am I supposed to see something, meow? No, I was just thinking about something. Su Yi shook his head. It seems that although outsiders can see the golden finger, they cannot see the specific content inside. But where should we go to get the first accompanying beast now? Su Yi was confused. Although in the game, he explored the ancient tree forest and went home, but after it became a reality, it was not only difficult to distinguish the direction here, and since there are no longer regional restrictions on the game, the situation has become more complicated. I don't know if environmental creatures count. Looking around, the setting sun was gradually rising, and there were no shadows of the herbivorous dragons and crested dragons that were classified as small creatures. In the game, there are mainly 3 types of creatures in the map. The first type is large creatures, that is, the large monsters that various hunters mainly fight against. They are weak or strong and have different ecologies. The second type is small creatures. They generally play a role in embellishment of hunting in the map environment. The third type is small creatures. 3 are environmental creatures. They are not the main targets to kill and can be captured relatively easily with some patience. They mainly play the role of embellishment of the environmental ecology. Naturally, environmental creatures are the weakest creatures, with the exception of the frog. Su Yi's idea was to immediately capture an environmental creature to complete the initial mission and gain the foundation to become a hunter, and then plan to capture the accompanying beast to gradually become stronger, thus giving him the capital to gain a foothold in this world of the jungle. However, this is not a game. Environmental creatures will not wait stupidly for hunters to approach and capture them. When they fled in a panic, they had already frightened away the small creatures around them. At this moment, the surroundings were extremely quiet. It's really quiet in the forest, and there are no monsters that suddenly appear. As long as you work harder to complete the initial mission, you can slowly conquer all kinds of monsters. In other words, it's too quiet, Su Yi sighed, and then realized that even though they scared away some creatures, the forest was too quiet. Something doesn't feel good, meow. Elu cat shook its furry body and became alert. That's. Su Yi's eyes suddenly caught a glimpse of a pair of red lights swaying in the shadow of the trees behind Mau Mau. As an experienced gamer, he immediately realized something, and his scalp went numb instantly. Whizzing, the monster in the dark swung its tail. Several blasts of wind sounded quickly, and several thorns shot out. Danger! Su Yi threw Mao Mao down without thinking. Phew! One of the sharp objects scraped across Su Yi's back, and immediately opened a bloody mark on his back. What's wrong? Meow! Monster! Lu Kao quickly climbed up from Su Yi's arms and looked at the dark figure slowly approaching in the bushes. It's the Velociraptor. I just escaped from the forest thugs, the barbarian jaw dragon, and now I've encountered the red meteor, the Velociraptor. Su Yi gritted his teeth as he endured the severe pain in his back. This forest once again showed him the cruelty of this world where monsters are rampant. This is not a game. It will not adapt to your strength and produce monsters with just the right strength. Instead, whatever should be there may appear. If it were a stupid big guy like the barbarian jaws with a hard-to-use head, some hunters could get rid of it with some tricks, but an agile and alert hunter like Velociraptor was not that easy to fool. There are no more stink bombs, meow. Mao Mao obviously had no other options. The Velociraptor let out a low roar and stepped out of the shadows little by little. Its pupils surrounded by red eyeshadow radiated a cruel killing intent towards its prey. Clang! Mao Mao pulled out a short bone knife from her waist that was no longer as long as a watermelon knife, and then threw Su Yi a flat round medicine bottle with the mark of a cat's claw meatball. Drink the recovery potion and run away with all your strength, I will help you hold it back, meow. At this moment, the short figure of Elu Maulukao was so majestic. No, I'm the one who got you into trouble. I won't just leave like this. Besides, I still have a chance. Su Yi was unwilling to leave his life-saving cat and run away. Although neither hunters nor cats will actually die in the game, that is just a game mechanism. Lu Cao's simple leather equipment shows that he is also a fledgling Elukit. Such novice cats can hardly escape the pursuit of the dragon. Go away. Su Yi activated the capture ball to the size of his fist, and then threw it towards the Velociraptor with all his strength. The Velociraptor looked at the flying capture ball warily, and stretched out its claws to fly away. Unexpectedly, as soon as it touched the capture ball opened with a pop, and a white light shot out from it, covering the Velociraptor and sucking it away. Got in. Of course, Su Yi didn't expect that he could conquer the Zunlong with one goal. What's going on, meow? Lu Kao was startled by the sudden disappearance of the dragon. There's no time to explain. Lu Sao, are you willing to believe me? Su Yi took out a capture ball again. As the first partner, is there anyone more suitable and reliable than Mao Mao? Bang! The captured ball that was captured by the Velociraptor shook violently. Su Yi. Mao Mao didn't know why. Su Yi smiled bitterly, then turned to a firm look and said, although my ability as a hunter is completely messed up now, I hope you can help me and become my partner. I will help you. Lu Sao looked at Su Yi's sincere and expectant eyes and nodded vigorously. Then, don't resist, come and score the ball. Let's be partners, Ibo partners. Su Yi held the capture ball and stretched out to Mao Mao. Ibo, ha! Mao Mao slapped his paw on the button of the ball without hesitation. The ball clicked and sucked the Alulu grass into the ball. Bang! At the same time, the capture ball that entered the Velociraptor suddenly exploded. The Velociraptor shook his head angrily, and then fixed his gaze on Su Yi. The mission is completed and the reward has been placed in the inventory. Return immediately or continue exploring. If I hadn't died, I would have conquered you. Su Yi looked embarrassed, but smiled and held the capture ball that was no longer shaking in his hand. Roar! Seeing the prey smiling so confidently, the Velociraptor roared angrily, unfolded the blades of its front claws, and pounced on Su Yi quickly. Return! Su Yi shouted. Aha! Just when the blade wing was about to cut Su Yi in two, Su Yi turned into light and disappeared instantly. Ouch! The Velociraptor was shocked. It quickly scanned its surroundings and saw no trace of any living creature. It sniffed the air, and finally left the place quickly and vigilantly. Why is it a forest again? When Su Yi chose to return, he only felt a blur in front of his eyes, and stood on the ground again. But when he looked up, he still saw a lush forest in front of him, but the figure of the Velociraptor was gone. Another place. But he thought he would return to a place like a stronghold or camp, but he didn't expect it to be a forest. Isn't there going to be another monster coming out? Su Yi, who had just endured a severe beating, suddenly became extremely vigilant. Bang! The capture ball in Su Yi's hand suddenly opened. Mao Mao Lukao clenched the bone dagger and dropped it to the ground, shouting, Su Yi. I'm here. Don't be nervous, we are safe for the time being. Looking at the anxious Mao Mao, Su Yi quickly comforted him. Lukao looked at the surrounding environment and breathed a sigh of relief after confirming that there were no monsters. That's awesome, meow. Su Yi, how did you escape, meow? Mao Mao said with admiration. Su Yi scratched his head in embarrassment and said, I'm just lucky. It would be bad if I didn't bet right. Besides, I don't know where we are now. As Su Yi said, if he returns instead of teleporting him away immediately, but waits for a few seconds, he will be killed by Zunlong, so he is betting on the best situation, and now it seems that this golden finger is pretty reliable. As for the ancient tree forest, I'll find the direction and identify the road. As he spoke, Lukao took out a compass, then looked up to find the iconic giant ancient tree in the ancient tree forest as a landmark. However, there is nothing. Under the blue sky and white clouds, the trees here are much shorter than the original forests of the ancient tree forest, and the iconic and magnificent ancient trees are also missing. Su Yi, where is this place? Meow. Mao Mao suddenly became at a loss. I don't know either. Su Yi looked around, trying to find clues, and then caught a glimpse of a strange creature looking at him secretly. Ah, Su Yi exclaimed, not because the creature was too weird, but because he was so familiar with it. What's wrong, meow, monster? Mao Mao looked in the direction Su Yi was looking at, and saw a round pink creature more than 1 meter tall standing behind the tree and sticking its head out, its small eyes full of curious. It was a creature Lukao had never seen before, and its style was not like any creature he had ever seen. Gili egg, it's actually a Pokémon. What kind of world have I come to? No, no, no. It's not even sure if I'm in the Monster Hunter world now. Is returning to the world of Pokémon. Su Yi was confused. Is this Goldfinger the Pokémon Goldfinger in the Monster Hunter world, or the Pokémon Hunter Goldfinger in the Pokémon world? Or is it both? Su Yi took off the book from his waist. What was drawn on it was the blue star of Monster Hunter World and the 5th group emblem. This was obviously an element of Monster Hunter World, but what conquered his companions was the elves of Pokémon World, Ball. Monster Hunter New World, Pokémon World, isn't this a dream collaboration? Su Yi suddenly became very interested. As mentioned before, his hobbies are monster hunting and Pokémon. How could he not be excited about this fantasy linkage and the double chef ecstasy? This means more possibilities and more exciting adventures. Lucky. Gili Dan walked out from behind the tree and looked at Su Yi worriedly. Su Yi, you lost a lot of blood, meow. Mao Mao looked back at Su Yi and saw a large pool of blood on the ground behind Su Yi. The tail spine shot by the velociraptor caused a long and narrow wound. Su Yi, who was in a tense state, temporarily ignored the injury, but the sudden excitement and relaxation made him aware of his situation. Aha, I'm a little dizzy. The pale Su Yi shook his head and then slowly fell down. Lucky. Su Yi, lucky. Gili Egg held a few tree fruits and handed them to Su Yi, who was recovering from serious injuries. Thank you, Gili Egg. After Su Yi sincerely thanked him, he took the orange and pomelo fruits and gave some to Lukao. Seeing Su Yi regaining his strength, Gili Egg smiled happily, then turned around to release healing waves to other injured Pokémon. Looking at the lucky eggs that were patiently treating wild Pokémon, Su Yi sighed. Sure enough, these Pokémon are full of kindness. When it first met the lucky egg, this Pokémon was so kind and extended a helping hand to strangers, and then gave them tree fruits that are relatively precious to wild Pokémon. According to the illustrated book, Gili eggs will actively help injured humans and Pokémon. No wonder they are regarded as partners by the Joey family, and together they provide healing services to passing trainers at the Pokémon Center. First, he was rescued by the kind-hearted Lukao, and then the enthusiastic Gili Egg healed his injuries. The shadow of being chased by the barbarian Jaw Dragon and hunted by the Velociraptor also disappeared a lot. This is indeed the world of Pokémon. Su Yi sighed as he looked at the Pokémon who came to seek help from the auspicious eggs. The highly recognizable tree fruits and various Pokémon should undoubtedly belong to the Pokémon world. But which area is this? Su Yi looked at those Pokémon. Lobster minions, Oops, Centipede, and Pikachu are all Pokémon from several generations. How do you confirm them? Su Yi, this fruit is delicious, meow. I feel like my physical strength has recovered a lot immediately, meow. Lu Sao said happily. If it's delicious, just eat more. Su Yi touched Mao Mao's furry head and said with a smile. Lu Cao stood up and casually took a fruit next to her. Just when Lu Cao grabbed the apple-like fruit. Gee, the apple suddenly showed two eyes and let out a scream. The harsh sound suddenly frightened Lu Sao and threw the apple away in horror. What is it? Meow. Grumble. The apple-like Pokémon broke free and ran away. Fruit Nar. Su Yi immediately recognized that Pokémon. It was the Pokémon that appeared for the first time in the 8th generation of Sword and Shield, a grass and dragon type Fruit Nar. Amayan Galar. As soon as this Pokémon appeared, Su Yi immediately thought of his possible location. It's just that Galar is so big, it's impossible for fruit-gnawing bugs to only appear in fixed places like in the game. As long as the environment allows, this kind of Pokémon may appear. Although it is very likely that I am in Galar, the specifics or the location is still unknown. Recuperate your injuries first, and then study my golden finger carefully. Leaning under a big tree, Su Yi opened the book and found that the 5 options of mission, map, accompanying beast, ecological report, and item all lit up, and the title page there is also a hunter's business card, which shows his appearance when he first arrived, wearing modern clothes, and marked below, Hunter Guild send New World Survey Team 5th Phase Team recommended Group Hunter number 001. This. Su Yi was a little at a loss. He was not a guild hunter at all. Should he add Pokémon World Survey Team 1st Group Hunter number 001? Of course this is just a joke. Su Yi began to study the contents of this book carefully. First, Su Yi clicked on the task interface and flipped through the pages. There was no task on it. Instead, he was prompted to conduct an exploration investigation. Moreover, in this interface, he could choose whether to continue exploring at the coordinates he left last time. Su Yi naturally didn't want to return to the ancient tree forest to explore immediately. He had to at least be prepared before he could enter that dangerous world again. It seems that except for the first task, does the triggering of other tasks require exploration and investigation? Su Yi thought deeply. In the game, Monster Hunter World, there are various tasks, one of which is called investigation. As for the investigation mission, as the hunter explores the traces of monsters and participates in the discovery and battle of monsters, he will find some investigation reports, and these reports can be registered as tasks on the task bar, and there will be relatively considerable rewards after completion. As for this cheats mission, it feels a bit more like an investigation mission, but it also has a higher degree of freedom. The map is also simple. It records the places Su Yi has explored in Monster Hunter World, and can make some simple marks. However, currently only the road where the barbarian Jaw Dragon is being chased has been lit and drawn. After that, Su Yi's capital is the accompanying beast. Because he has long passed the age of laying the foundation, and has not been able to nurture a person in the hunter world, so no matter how hard he trains, it is difficult for him to meet the hunter standards of that world. Naturally, he cannot be a monster hunter, he can only be a monster hunter. Pokémon Battle. The page of the book was turned, and the interface suddenly became full of Pokémon. On the only grid, there was a shrunken Q version cow-patterned cat jumping around, with the name, Lu Cao and status, out in battle marked next to it. The level and blood volume are not displayed. These things can be quantified in the game. In reality, these things cannot be quantified so accurately, which is understandable. When you click on the information about Dewgrass, the Pokémon on that screen is full of Pokémon, including attributes, characteristics, moves, carrying items, etc. Let me see. Su Yi suddenly became interested. Name, Lu Cao. Race, a Lu Cat male. Properties, general. Characteristics, cat attack. A Lu Cat will change its attributes according to the suit it is wearing. Moves, cat attacks changes according to equipment, scratches, and meows. Carrying props, none. It's really just Pokémon. Su Yi called out, good guy. Cats all have attributes and characteristics, even though they are extremely ordinary, general types. I can understand scratching and meowing, but cat claws and meowing. As for the move with the same name as the characteristic, it seems to be an exclusive move. Su Yi carefully checked the description of the cat attack move. The power was 80. It was a normal physical move, but it could change the skill attributes and form according to the suit the cat was wearing. Aibo, are you a follower cat of a certain hunter? Su Yi couldn't help but ask Lu Kao. With its characteristics and moves, it looks like a follower cat that can wear suits made of various monster materials. Mao Mao said with some embarrassment, I'm just a trainee adventure cat, meow. I'm usually only responsible for collecting some simple materials, meow. Indeed, Lu Kao was wearing initial leather armor, and her only weapon was a bone dagger, and a cat was out, unlike a hunter's follower cat. Aibo, after being put into the ball, did you feel any changes in your body? Su Yi asked with concern. Lu Kao scratched his head and thought, it seems that my body is more active, nya. Also, after eating just now, my physical strength and injuries are recovering faster, nya. Speed up recovery. Su Yi picked up the berries. These berries can indeed quickly restore the Pokemon's physical strength, but the effect was not immediate after he ate it. Although the scars on his back were scabbed by the healing wave, if you are not careful, it will still crack and bleed. In other words, tree fruits are only effective against dewgrass and Pokemon. Is it possible? Aibo, use grab. Su Yi suddenly shouted. Meow. Lu Kao was startled, and immediately waved his claws in a panic. At this moment, Lu Kao subconsciously activated something, and Lu Kao's cat claws lit up with white light and began to become slender. What's going on? Meow. Lu Kao looked at the changes in her claws and was at a loss. And Su Yi said excitedly as if he had opened the door to a new world, sure enough, this golden finger is not that simple, Aibo has acquired the characteristics of Pokemon. Pokemon. What do you mean, meow? Su Yi was very calm when he saw those strange creatures when he first came here, meow. Where is this place? What happened to me? Lu Kao said in one breath. Asked about the adventure that happened in this short period of time. Su Yi could not deceive Aibo who trusted him so much. He took a deep breath and began to introduce the settings of the Pokemon world to Lu Kao. So that's it, meow. But, it's really unimaginable, meow, that you have gained a magical power and come to another world or something. Isn't this really a very far away continent, meow? Lu Kao scratched cutely. Maoerdu exclaimed. As an Alu cat born in the star stronghold of the New World, its world may only be a small area of the star stronghold and the ancient tree forest. Even if it has heard of the old road and the wider world inside the New World, it is only full of longing for it. That's it really can't imagine another equally fantastic world. Su Yi is so awesome, meow. He can actually bring me to such a wonderful place, meow. I want to be Su Yi's follower cat, meow. Lu Sao looked at Su Yi with longing and admiration again, her big watery eyes full of curiosity and longing. Until this moment, Lu Sao did not complain about Su Yi suddenly taking him to a completely unfamiliar place, but believed in him and hoped to go on an adventure with him. Su Yi felt Mao Mao's trust and expectation for him, and was very moved. He took a deep breath and said seriously, no. You are not a follower cat, but my Aibo partner. Don't worry. Whether it is the New World or the Pokemon world, I will take you to see the stunning scenery. Quote. At the same time, Su Yi's dusty heart revived again. Wasn't Lu Sao's simple wish what he expected when he was still innocent? Now that I have such a possibility, how can I live up to such an opportunity? Lucky. Gili Dan looked at Su Yi doubtfully. At this moment, Su Yi changed his outfit. The tattered modern clothes were thrown away. He was wearing the original leather suit in Monster Hunter World. The tough and light leather clothes can not only protect the body, but also protect the body. Does not affect strenuous exercise. The most eye-catching ones are naturally the projector on his left hand and the insect canister on his waist. These two things are powerful tools for hunters to explore the map. The slinger can launch various projectiles and capture nets. The hook rope launched by the slinger can help hunters travel through various terrains, and it can also launch flying claws to assist hunting. Guide insects can help hunters track monsters and discover available resources around them. Of course, these things, including the initial items such as barbecue combinations and sharpening stones that have already been placed in items, are the basis of the hunter rewarded in the initial mission. More importantly, some basic hunter knowledge is turned into memory and imprinted in the brain. However, it requires personal practice to fully turn it into an ability. What Su Yi wanted to complain about was that the basics of hunting also included making cat rice. But think about it, in Monster Hunter World, the protagonist receptionist can also cook cat rice. Although that may be because she is a foodie, it is undeniable that when going out hunting, she can make cat rice according to local conditions. Food that can enhance a hunter's status will definitely be of great help in hunting. Besides, no one can help Su Yi make cat rice. And now, after a night's rest, Su Yi, fully armed, was about to set off again. Lucky. Ji Liden looked at Su Yi worriedly and pointed at the injury on his back. Su Yi smiled and said, "There is no problem anymore. Besides, Aibo has some things to do." That's right, Su Yi, who had been resting for the night, planned to enter the Monster Hunter world again because of Lu Xiao's request. After Lu Xiao learned that he would not be able to stay in the Star Stronghold for a period of time, he planned to return to the Stronghold to apply for a long-term outing, and informed Don't Worry, his friends. Ji Li Dan was still very worried. Looking at the worried Ji Li Dan, Su Yi had an idea and thought of something that needed to be verified. It was still the forest, with thick trees and bright sunshine. With a flash of light, Su Yi and Lu Xiao came here together. "I'm back, meow." Through the dense leaves, Lu Xiao saw the familiar ancient giant tree. There is no danger around for the time being. Su Yi warned the surroundings, and then saw the thorns stuck on the ground. These are the thorns on the tail of the velociraptor. Su Yi squatted down, and there were 2 thorns like puffed feathers stuck on the ground. This thing can cause lacerations. The more you exercise, the more the injury will be aggravated. No wonder the bleeding continued that day. Su Yi said. Countless green insect guides flew out from the insect guide jar on his waist and attached to the thorns. However, these guide insects did not start to search for traces of other velociraptors. Apparently, the velociraptor had been away for a long time, and its traces were already difficult to detect. But that's also a good thing. Aibo, let's go to the outskirts of the ancient tree forest. Su Yi said. Lu Xiao took out the compass and said cheerfully, "No problem, meow." Using the method of hiding one's body in the basic knowledge of hunters, Su Yi and Lu Xiao came to the outskirts from the middle of the ancient tree forest without any danger. Pushing aside the trees, a coastal area with few trees suddenly opened up, and further away, you could see the endless sea. A dozen herbivorous dragons, like herbivorous dinosaurs, wandered leisurely among the puddles and dew grass. In the sky, several pink birds carefully landed on the ground to peck at fruits and grass seeds. Several ears and the circumambulation rabbit with its long and slender tail was basking in the sun and cleaning its hair. All of this is far more shocking than the first time he came here in the game. The breeze, the sunshine, the melodious chirping echoing in the ears, all of these are extremely real. The passionate music of Proof of Heroes seems to be ringing in my mind. Everything starts out so ordinary, but after that, it will be magnificent. Roar. Suddenly, the piercing roar resounded through the seaside, and everything was frightened for a moment. The small creatures dispersed. Su Yi was startled and quickly retracted into the trees behind him, while the larger herbivorous dragons ran towards various places in a panic and clumsily. Call. Giant wings flew across the sky, the early wind surged, and a huge light green figure flew out of the ancient tree forest, then aimed at a herbivorous dragon and descended from the sky like a goshawk preying on prey. Woo! The herbivorous dragon screamed in grief and was pinned to the ground by the huge flying dragon. Moreover, its struggle gradually became weaker as its claws tightened. Roar! The green flying dragon roared again, as if announcing the ownership of the prey. Then, instead of enjoying it on the spot, she easily dragged the nearly 10-meter-long herbivorous dragon into the sky, and then headed towards the top of the ancient tree forest. Fly away. The flying dragon had already flown far away. At this time, those alert little creatures poked their heads in the air, and then cautiously returned to the open space. The herbivorous dragon returned to the grass angrily and continued to eat. Su Yi walked out of the bushes and sighed, "Is that the female fire dragon? It is indeed beautiful and breathtaking." He had to admit that when he saw the female fire dragon hunting quickly and fiercely, Su Yi couldn't help but hold his breath and tense up, for fear of being targeted by the ferocious flying dragon. At the same time, Su Yi also longed for it. When could he conquer such a monster and become his partner? It's exciting just to think about it. But everything must be done step by step. Su Yi turned his attention to the herbivorous dragons that started to eat leisurely again. He opened the golden finger of the book he named Hunting Manual, opened the page of Accompanying Beasts, and tapped lightly, and a pokeball appeared in the palm of his hand. Please stay on the side and hold on. Gili Egg. Su Yi threw the red and white ball, and a round pink Pokemon appeared in front of him. Lucky. The lucky egg appeared happily, and then looked around curiously. This is what Su Yi wants to verify. It turns out that the capture ball and the elf ball given in the Hunting Manual have the same function and can capture Pokemon and monsters. But I don't know if the elf ball in the Pokemon world can capture monsters. Points to be verified. Captured Pokemon can also be put into the companion column and carried with you, and companion can accommodate multiple Pokemon and companions. It's just that there are only 6 that can be set to go into battle. Just like the Pokemon box in Pokemon Sword and Shield, you can switch between the partners in the team and those in the box at any time. In other words, all members can only play 6 at a time, but these 6 can be switched with any of the accompanying beasts at any time. Aibo, I'm asking you, too. Su Yi nodded to Lu Sao. Put it on me, meow. Lu Kao took out the bone dagger with great enthusiasm. Su Yi showed a smile on his face, then pointed at the nearest herbivorous dragon and shouted, Aibo. Use the cat to attack. Try my new power, NYA. Lu Kao excitedly waved the dagger. Suddenly, a white light enveloped the bone dagger and extended a short distance. The originally ordinary sword became quite powerful. Aha! The sharp blade cut across, blood spattered, and the short knife immediately carved a long and narrow scar on the herbivorous dragon's body. Woo! The herbivorous dragon screamed in pain, staggered back, and then ran away. Its cry of pain immediately caused a chain reaction, and the surrounding herbivorous dragons fled in panic. It's just that their speed is really not flattering. Creatures like herbivorous dragons are basically not aggressive, unlike the armored dragons in the Great Ant Mound Wasteland, which will attack people when cornered. There was no suspense in the ensuing battle. The selected herbivorous dragon was chased by Lu Kao and attacked by cats. For a while, it was hacked to the point of wailing and dying. Although the enemy had no resistance at all, and although it was just a simple one-sided battle, this was Su Yi's first command of the battle, and it completely confirmed the fact that Lu Kao had become a Pokemon. Okay, this is my first real capture. Su Yi took out a capture ball with great interest. But at this moment, a sudden change occurred. Ouch! From the trees not far away, a huge yellow-green lizard crawled out and rushed towards Su Yi with its claws and teeth. Lucky! Gili Egg was startled when he saw such a ferocious monster. Aibo! Gili Egg! Get away! Su Yi shouted seriously and immediately ran away from the monster. Ouch! The big green lizard with 2 braid-like manes on its back pinned down the seriously injured herbivorous dragon with 1 claw and occupied other people's prey like a bully. It's the big ferocious jackal dragon, meow! Lu Kao exclaimed. Yes, and he has set his sights on our target. Su Yi frowned. This iguana-like monster is the first large monster that players see in the game, and it is also the first large monster that they defeat, the great ferocious jackal. This toothed dragon monster is one of the monsters in the lower ecological niche of the ancient tree forest, and because of its digestive ability that is so powerful that it can even damage its own stomach wall, the big ferocious jackal dragon needs to hunt frequently. Therefore, it moves frequently. Encounter with other monsters or hunters. Ouch! The ferocious jackal dragon looked at the retreating Su Yi and his party, and immediately bit the herbivorous dragon to death, opened its big mouth, and swallowed the herbivorous dragon whole. Its flexible and extremely stretchable belly immediately swelled. Whoops! The big ferocious jackal exhaled, as if belching a satisfying burp. It puffed up its belly and roared as if in demonstration. At the same time, from the trees behind it, 5 or 6 ferocious jackal dragons that looked like smaller and thinner versions of the ferocious jackal dragon ran out. They surrounded the ferocious jackal dragon and roared at Su Yi and his party in protest. Don't panic, step back step by step. Su Yi reminded in a low voice. Lu Kao and Gili Dan followed Su Yi and slowly backed away from the ferocious jackal dragon. At this time, the big ferocious jackal dragon crawled towards the bushes with its big belly, obviously wanting to return to its lair to slowly digest its prey. After the ferocious jackal dragon beside it roared a few times, it followed suit. Leaving behind the big ferocious jackal, he was like a little gangster showing off his power behind the boss of the Black Society. Huh, Su Yi breathed a sigh of relief. Although these monsters are the kind of monsters that players can bully and manipulate in the game, for him now, these monsters are still very threatening. Looking around, he saw that due to the trouble caused by that group of villains, the herbivorous dragons around him had long since disappeared into the forest, and the surrounding area was empty. Tough luck, Su Yi thought for a while and then understood that it must be the sound of the female fire dragon hunting, which alerted the big ferocious jackal dragon that was looking for food. As soon as the big ferocious jackal dragon arrived, he saw the seriously injured herbivorous dragon at his fingertips, so he staged the scene just now one scene. This ferocious jackal didn't come sooner or later, and it happened to come just when Su Yi was about to lose the ball. It was indeed quite unlucky. Brother Zongfen, the nickname of the fierce jackal among players, wait. Su Yi said with an ugly expression. If you disturb his hunting or make him angry in the game, you will chase the monster and slash him every minute. On the verge of death, escape home and sleep. Don't sleep too hard, take the big bomb barrel G to your door right away. Unfortunately that's only in the game. In a forest on a higher ground in the seaside area, Su Yi pushed aside the branches. This hidden corner slowly revealed a camp that had not been taken care of for a long time. The tents were a little skewed, the bonfires had been scattered, the stone stove had not been cleaned, and the old wooden there was a pile of scraps scattered next to the box. Huh, there really is one. Su Yi only followed the idle camp found by the receptionist when the character landed on the pterodactyl from the back of the molten mountain dragon in the game and landed in the new world. He didn't expect that such a place really existed. The location is hidden. Although it lacks maintenance, the materials are not broken. After tidying up, it will be a good campsite. Just do it. In fact, there is nothing complicated. Check the tent, deal with the debris, and clean up the surroundings. Half an hour later, the entire camp has a new look. At this time, the hunting manual on the waist buzzes, and the cover is blue. The star shines. Su Yi looked at it curiously. On the map, his current location was automatically marked with a camp symbol, and the hunting manual reminded that next time he could come to this coastal forest camp, not from the last time. The coordinates of departure arrive. All in all, he will be much safer next time he comes to Monster Hunter World. Just stay here for one night today, Aibo. You can go and do your business first. It's not very far from the star base. Su Yi looked through the woods. Because the terrain he was on was higher, it was similar to a seaside cliff. Because of the woods above, you can vaguely see the star stronghold formed by huge ships in the distance. Is Su Yi really not going to see the star stronghold with me? Lu Sao asked, tilting her head. Su Yi shook his head and said, now is not the time. This is not like the Pokémon world. As long as he says that he is from another continent, and has a Pokémon accompanying beast they don't know to prove it, then his identity can at least withstand some scrutiny. Except for the ancient dragon people, there are no native humans in the new world. The only humans are the investigation team of the Star Stronghold, and the personnel are all registered. It is possible to check who is in the stronghold. Suddenly, an unknown person like Su Yi appears. Human beings are bound to be suspected, so now is not the time for him to appear in the sights of the New World investigation team. Su Yi's initial plan was to wait until he had conquered a certain number of companion beasts or Pokémon with a certain strength and number before he would appear in front of them as a trainer from another continent. Because of this, even if the investigation team, if you don't believe him, you can't do anything to him. Okay, I'm off, meow. Lu Kao waved to Su Yi and Gili Dan, then ran away on all fours. I'm still a little uncomfortable with Aibo leaving all at once, Su Yi said with a wry smile. Unknowingly, Lu Kao, the trustworthy Ailu cat, gradually became Su Yi's presence to dispel loneliness in another world. Lucky. Looking at Su Yi, who was a little melancholy and a little uneasy, Jillidan reached out and took out the egg from his belly pocket and handed it to Su Yi. Give it to me, Su Yi said in surprise. Lucky, said the lucky egg with a smile. Su Yi took the round egg and thanked him with a smile. Thank you very much, Gili Egg, for being willing to accompany me to this strange place to help me. Although Gili Dan was subdued in name, it was actually Su Yi who asked Gili Dan to help them. In addition to verifying whether he could bring Pokémon into the world of monster hunting, he wanted a nanny like Gili Dan to be able to help them. They add a little bit of security. Good things must be shared. I will be responsible for tonight's dinner. Su Yi smiled and took out a large handful of deliciously fragrant fungi from behind. This is a specialty mushroom he found not far away with the help of a guide insect when he was cleaning the camp. In the game, it is a prop for settling investigation points, but in reality, it is a very delicious food. Although he did not dig up the moonlight antler and aura mushroom or treasures, but they are also a delicacy. Use the flint found in the camp to light the clean stone oven, and then put the specialty mushrooms on it. The mushrooms on the stone plate are roasted to dry out part of the water, and the fresh fragrance in the mushrooms is further concentrated. There is no seasoning, just blow it and put it into your mouth. The fresh fragrance of nature spreads in your mouth. Although it is not as satisfying as a large piece of barbecue, it is still very memorable. Lucky. Gilly Egg slowly chewed the roasted mushrooms with enjoyment. Being used to eating tree fruits, it tasted the delicious fragrance of this other world for the first time. I must find some more for Aibo to try tomorrow. When I have time to explore, I must eat the new world on the tip of the tongue. Su Yi couldn't help but have another expectation for this continent. Finally, after carefully tasting the nutritious eggs of Gilly Eggs, Su Yi finished the dinner and entered the tent to rest. Su Yi, I'm back, meow. Early in the morning, when Su Yi returned from searching for specialty mushrooms, he saw Lu Kao waving to him excitedly at the camp. Is the matter done? Su Yi asked, putting down the mushroom. It's done, meow. Also, I brought you some gifts, meow. Lu Kao handed over two things from the small bag on his back like a treasure presenter. One of them is very familiar to Su Yi. It is a telescope. With it, the field of view becomes wider. And another. This is, Su Yi said in surprise, looking at the slightly heavy metal product in his hand. This is a sword, meow. I don't think Su Yi has a hunter's weapon. Although Su Yi may not need it, I hope Su Yi can protect himself. Lu Sao scratched his head and said. This is a very basic iron hand sword. Su Yi put it on bit by bit according to the memory in the hunter's basics. The light dagger can be taken and put freely, and the light small buckler can block at any time. For a rookie with no hunting experience at all, the advantage of this weapon is that it is easy to use. Although Su Yi probably will not use it to hunt personally, it has some means of counterattack and defense. Unexpectedly, my first hunter weapon was given by El Cat. Didn't this cost a lot of money? Su Yi asked. Lu Sao didn't look like he was very rich. It didn't cost much, meow, and I think this is something Su Yi might need. Mao Mao said. Su Yi picked up Mao Mao, put his forehead against Lu Cao's forehead and rubbed it, then looked at Mao Mao's confused eyes and said with a smile, then let's go, Aibo. Meow. In the open space on the beach, the herbivorous dragons appeared again. It seemed that they had always been like this, eating leisurely, being preyed on, then escaping, and then continuing to eat. Let's change the target to the Corynthosaurus this time. The herbivorous dragon is really not aggressive. The biggest use of catching it is probably as a camel beast used to transport goods. Starting from here, passing by a patch of dense grass, the terrain begins to slope downward, and the slope gradually turns into sand, connecting to the sea water that is constantly washing up. Close to the vegetation, the Corynthosaurus family is resting leisurely in a configuration of 2 males and 3 females. The male Corynthosaurus has a bony skull similar to Pachycephalosaurus, and has bony plates extending to protect the neck, while the female has much smaller features. It's a small creature with some fighting ability. Su Yigang was about to get closer when a familiar roar sounded again. It's you again. Su Yi shrank back into the grass, followed the sound, and saw the big ferocious jackal dragon rushing out of the woods at the top of the slope, its thick limbs running quickly towards the crowned dragon. While the crowned dragon raised its head and faced the big ferocious jackal, it hit the ground with its head and made a solid sound, trying to intimidate it, but it was of no use. The big ferocious jackal opened its mouth and was about to bite the crowned dragon. At this time, the mantis stalked the cicada, with the oriole behind. The seawater exploded with a roar, and a huge, slender figure came out of the water. It opened its mouth and roared fiercely at the big ferocious jackal dragon. The tall figure standing tall in the sun intimidated the big ferocious jackal dragon. Oh, Hai Long, the sea dragon that broke out of the water crawled with 4 claws like a crocodile, its long and powerful tail twisted slowly, its slender neck was like the spread neck of a cobra, its hard carapace was pale blue, and there were 2 obvious rows on its back, spiked protrusions. The strutting sea dragon was even bigger than the big ferocious jackal. As the sea dragon landed on the shore in a menacing step, the big ferocious jackal roared while slowly retreating, obviously intimidated by the oppressive sea dragon. It's really Hai Long. Isn't this the cancellation of Monster Hunter World? Su Yi hid in the distance and looked at the fierce Hai Long, surprised. In the early development videos of Monster Hunter World, there was an ecology of sea dragons haunting the water storage area of the ancient tree forest. Later, it was said that it was a problem with the sea dragon's skeleton that caused this monster to have to be abandoned later. If you think about it carefully, it is actually reasonable for the ancient tree forest to appear near the sea, but it was abandoned due to technical problems. But now, this monster that was supposed to shine in the work strutted towards the land, showing its presence to the entire forest. More and more monsters are really starting to appear. Su Yi whispered enthusiastically. In just 2 days, he met a total of 5 large monsters: the barbarian jaw dragon, the velociraptor, the female fire dragon, the fierce jackal dragon and the sea dragon. This continent, which has not had too much interference from hunters, is a paradise for monsters. The game is just a game. Due to technical and capacity issues, many monsters that may survive here may not be represented in the game, but the fact is that this is a continent with unimaginable diversity. Roar! Hai Long roared angrily, opened his mouth and bit, easily killing the Corontosaurus. Just when the ferocious jackal dragon retreated in anger, Hai Long was about to enjoy the spoils. Roar! In the sky, a majestic roar exploded into the sky. Call! Along with the ferocious roar, a huge fireball fell from the sky and hit Hai Long in front of him. Boom! The bursting flames overturned the innocent big ferocious jackal dragon. The scales in front of its body were exploded, leaving a large black mark. The big ferocious jackal dragon struggled on the ground in panic and tried to stand up. Hai Long roared angrily, and the 2 rows of protruding electric shells on its back stirred up blue lightning. Suddenly, electric snakes swam around Hai Long. Being disturbed from eating, it immediately entered a state of anger. Stab! The wandering electric snake hit the big ferocious jackal dragon that fell to the ground. Unfortunately, it was electrocuted and twitched. In the sky, the approaching challenger opened his mouth and roared, with flames lingering between his sharp teeth. The one coming is none other than the king of the sky, the fire dragon. All go! This is the reappearance of a classic. Su Yi's eyes widened. Seeing the king of the sky confronting the king of the sea, he seemed to have returned to the CG of Monster Hunter 3. The 2 kings, one at the top of the sky and the other at the top of the sea, one red and one blue, one weak to thunder and one weak to fire, restrain each other and form a pair of rivals in Monster Hunter. Although as you get to the back, the fire dragon has more and more old enemies. When 2 strong men meet, each relies on his own abilities. The male fire dragon opened its claws and swooped down. Seeing this, the sea dragon twisted its body and quickly dodged. Without attacking the sea dragon, the male fire dragon took advantage of the situation and grabbed the body of the coronal dragon, occupying the sea dragon's prey like a demonstration, and the sea dragon opened its mouth and spit out an electric ball with shining lightning. Not to be outdone, the male fire dragon responded with a bursting fireball. In an instant, there was a bang, thunder and fire exploded, and sand and dust flew up. The giant wings blew away the sand and dust, and the male fire dragon grabbed its prey and slowly rose into the air. After the sea dragon got rid of the dust, it could only roar reluctantly at the male fire dragon that was gradually getting away from the ground. In the end, the flying male fire dragon had a slight advantage. The sea dragon had no choice but to dive back into the water. Only the ferocious jackal dragon, which had been harmed by the 2 strong men in the fish pond, limped towards the forest. Opportunity. Su Yi pushed aside the grass and walked towards the battlefield. Suddenly, countless green insect guides flew out from the insect canister on his waist and attached to a pile of charred and broken scales. Then, the guide insect flew to the forest and began to chase the traces of the ferocious jackal dragon. Su Yi couldn't afford to offend the sea dragon and the male fire dragon for the time being, but the seriously injured fierce jackal dragon was an opportunity. Following the guide insect into the dense forest, the ferocious jackal dragon did not hide its traces. The traces of some fallen trees, claw marks, and even blood were all discovered by the guide insect one by one. Are you going back to the nest? Aren't you going to hunt for food? Su Yi looked at the guide insect pointing to a cave, and he hesitated. According to ecological habits, the big ferocious jackal dragon will indeed build its nest in such caves, and the ferocious jackal dragon that coexists with it will also enter the big ferocious jackal dragon's lair for shelter. In other words, if you rush into the lair now, you will not only have to face injured monsters in a narrow place, but also a group of annoying small monsters. This was not what he had originally envisioned. What Su Yi thought was that the injured jackal dragon needed food more, and the jackal dragon would also attack the jackal dragon when it was hungry, so the jackal dragon would hide when the jackal dragon hunted, so that peace could be achieved. A chance to face the fierce jackal alone. I remember that the cave in the game has another exit. Does this cave also have one? Could the big ferocious jackal dragon go out through that exit? Su Yi, who was hiding in the dense vegetation, was considering whether to go in and take a look when a sneaky figure came into view. Tickling a bird. A bird-like dragon monster with light yellow scales cautiously approached the cave. It had a skeleton and body like a raptor, with a thin torso and a head like a dodo. There were red and yellow feathers on the top of its head and on its front paws and elbows. I'll let you clear the way first. Looking at the scratching bird entering the cave, Su Yi chuckled and followed quietly. Due to the abundant water vapor in the ancient tree forest, the cave is moist and warm, and the luminous moss growing in it adds light to the dark cave. Tickle Bird explores the cave with ease. It seems to be a habitual offender, and its goal is. I saw the scratching bird rummaging through a simple nest made of dead branches and mulch, and in a moment, it dug out an egg about the size of a basketball. Not surprisingly, this is the egg hatched by the ferocious jackal dragon buried under the soil. Click. The tickling bird uses its sharp beak to carve open the egg a few times, then inserts the beak into the egg shell to enjoy it. The tickling bird is a veritable oviraptor. I didn't expect there would be an unexpected harvest. Su Yi hid behind the rock and looked at the scratching bird that was eating eggs. Suddenly an idea flashed and he connected with several things he had encountered before and suddenly thought of something. The female and male fire dragons are hunting in an area, and the eggs of the big ferocious jackal dragon are not in the breeding season now, right? Su Yi suddenly realized that a male and female fire dragon appeared in a forest at the same time. They shared the hunting ground, took turns to hunt, and carefully brought them back to the nest to enjoy. Does this mean that the female fire dragon had laid eggs, and now the couple were taking turns to protect them? Where are the dragon eggs? Of course, stealing the fire dragon eggs now is an act seeking death, because as mentioned before, the male and female fire dragons will take turns guarding them, so there is no chance to steal them. If you are not careful, you will cause a couple to fight. However, Su Yi remembered the monster ecology introduction he had seen before traveling through time, which said that male fire dragons in the New World would mate with multiple female fire dragons. Only powerful female fire dragons can share the excellent hunting grounds with male fire dragons and raise their offspring together. In addition, relatively weak female fire dragons will return to the wasteland of the Great Ant Mound to raise their offspring alone. I can't afford to offend the couple. As a single mother, there are times when you are not at home and go hunting. Su Yi shook his head and put these thoughts behind for the time being. Whether such an ecology is real or not, he doesn't even know how to get to the wasteland of the Big Ant Mound. The idea of stealing the fire dragon eggs is just empty talk now. Click. There was another sound of eggshells breaking. Su Yi looked over and saw a pile of eggshells falling in front of the scratching bird. What a glutton. Leave one for me. Su Yi cursed secretly. While he was thinking, the scratching bird didn't know how many eggs it had laid. The ferocious jackal dragon usually only lays 3 to 4 eggs, but the number is not huge. That's a lot. The greedy scratching bird finished eating the eggs in his hand, dug up the soil again, took out an egg, and then walked towards the other direction of the cave holding the egg. You still have to walk around if you can't eat. Su Yi was helpless. A vigilant scratching bird would usually move the eggs back to the nest to enjoy. At this moment, he just had to bring some reserve food home after he was full. As soon as the scratching bird left, Su Yi quickly walked to the nest and dug out the soft soil. It was not difficult to dig out the soft soil. He followed the soil dug by the scratching bird and dug around, but no other eggs were found. Oh, you're such a bad boy, Su Yi said angrily. And just when Su Yi was scolding the bird for being greedy, the owner hurriedly returned from the direction he left holding the egg of the ferocious jackal dragon. What's wrong? Su Yi hid in the fork in the cave and watched the scratching bird trot away in a hurry from the passage they came in. Behind him, an angry roar sounded. The owner of the nest is back. Su Yi saw a big ferocious jackal dragon with a bulging belly angrily driving the bird out of the cave. Although the big ferocious jackal dragon would not bother to protect the eggs, after all, this is its territory, its things. The big fierce jackal dragon with scars on its body was the one that Su Yi was tracking. Behind it, there were several fierce jackal dragons following behind it. The big ferocious jackal dragon has returned to its nest after eating a full meal. The big ferocious jackal dragon didn't even take out its eggs. Could it be that this hard work for a long time resulted in nothing? Su Yi couldn't help but feel a little angry. Su Yi followed the big ferocious jackal dragon, trying to track the scratching bird ahead to see if he could find the scratching bird's nest, and then see if he could steal eggs from the egg thief's food reserves. The well-fed big ferocious jackal dragon was obviously not as agile as the tickling bird. The tickling bird took a step forward and walked out of the cave at a leisurely pace. However, before it could get proud, a big mouth suddenly bit it down from above. Boom! The bird was bitten by the big mouth and pushed to the ground. Then the owner of the big mouth bit the bird and shook it. Looking at the ravaged birds outside the cave, Su Yi suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. Here comes a big guy. Boom, boom, boom. The big guy took a step forward and threw the bird hard to the ground. Inside the cave, the ferocious jackal roared loudly in protest when he saw that his territory was being blocked by people. Holy crap, you're a real tiger. How dare you challenge the barbarian jaw dragon? Through the scene flashing outside the cave, Su Yi determined that the one blocking the door was the forest thug barbarian Jaws. Although its ecological status was not as high as that of the fire dragon, it was still a bully in the forest. He still remembers the ecological performance in the game, the scene where the barbarian jaw dragon tore into the ferocious jackal dragon and smashed it to death. That's called violence, that's called miserable. Roar. The thugs cannot be provoked by you. The barbarian jaw dragon lowered its body, stuck its head into the cave and roared angrily at the big ferocious jackal dragon. Ouch! The big ferocious jackal roared not to be outdone. After all, it was a matter involving the lair. But apparently it underestimated the violent temper of the Tyrannosaurus. The Tyrannosaurus lowered its body, kicked up its strong hind legs, and squeezed into the cave. Run away. Su Yi didn't even think about tracking the scratching bird. Just after the barbarian jaw dragon bit him, the scratching bird and the egg had already been beaten. The big ferocious jackal dragon knew that he was no match for the barbarian jaw dragon, so he turned around and ran away. The cave was not very big. Su Yi, who was running with all his strength, saw the light. There were roars in the passage behind him, and he felt very close to him. The light rose sharply, and Su Yi ran out of the cave. The next moment, the big and ferocious jackal dragon with a big belly struggled to crawl out behind him, but the barbarian jaw dragon behind him violently pushed it out. Suddenly, the big ferocious jackal dragon rolled around a few times and struggled a few times before getting up in panic. At the same time, the barbarian jaw dragon got out of the narrow cave, stretched its body, and then roared loudly. Now, the ferocious jackal dragon is probably suffering. Su Yi looked back and immediately observed 2 seconds of silence for Brother Zongfen, who was too brave. The barbarian jaw dragon opened its nose bones to reveal the crown of its nose. While sniffing the scent, it unfolded the cooling films on both sides of its tail to dissipate heat. At the same time, it stared at the ferocious jackal dragon, ready to bite. However, it stopped sniffing the air and looked towards Su Yi from a distance. Did you find me? Su Yi immediately hid behind the trees, and his heart began to beat violently. Ouch! Ouch! The panic roar of the big ferocious jackal suddenly came. Just when Su Yi thought that the barbarian jaw dragon turned around and continued to deal with the big ferocious jackal dragon and felt a little relieved, a roar came, and the trees behind him were smashed heavily. As soon as the sound rang out, Su Yi, who had fallen to the ground, stood up and looked back. The big ferocious jackal dragon fell next to the broken tree, dying. The nose of the barbarian jaw dragon moved slightly, and its ferocious eyes stared at him. Roar! The barbarian jaw dragon roared even more furiously than when the ferocious jackal dragon provoked it just now. Could it be that you were the one who chased me back then? Su Yi's eyes widened instantly. What does it mean to meet thousands of miles apart? It's just a stink bomb, isn't it? Apparently, this barbarian dragon holds a grudge. You've found the wrong person, farewell. Su Yi didn't dare to stay any longer, so he turned around and ran away. Roar! The barbarian jaw dragon roared angrily and gave chase. Su Yi ran and cursed. You old man, if it weren't for the stink bomb, I would treat you to a second piece of ollie. The thug's fury made the forest suddenly lively, and Su Yi began to think quickly about ways to get rid of the barbarian jaw dragon. Unknowingly, they were running deeper into the forest. The restless breeding period made the monsters equally restless. Under the tall trees, a green flying dragon cautiously walked among the trees. It looked at the monsters running towards it and roared a warning. The female fire dragon ignored the weak Su Yi and roared fiercely at the barbarian jaw dragon, the sharp claws under its feet ready to move. It was impossible for the barbarian jaw dragon to ignore such a powerful enemy and began to confront the female fire dragon. Su Yi didn't dare to join in the fun and rushed into the trees until it was hard to hear the roars of the female fire dragon and the barbarian dragon. I didn't expect that being forced to return instantly to the first mission would be a bonus. Su Yi leaned against the tree and gasped. When he was just being chased by Brutal Jaw, he had thought about returning to the Pokémon world to avoid danger. Who knows, when he opened Goldfinger's hunting manual, he was told that he was in battle or being tracked and could not return. Only then did Su Yi realize that it was the first time that he was able to ignore the Zunlong that was confronting him and force him to return directly, which was a benefit of his first mission. It seems that we still have to be more careful. Su Yi sighed, took out the capture ball and released Lu Kao. Are you okay? Meow. As soon as Mao Mao played the ball, he looked at Su Yi with concern. It's okay, I just met an old acquaintance. Su Yi said with a smile. Mao Mao wrinkled her nose and said unhappily, Su Yi should keep letting me out, meow. I don't like the quiet environment in the ball, and I also want to take risks and help you, meow. Sorry, Aibo. Su Yi apologized with a wry smile. He had previously considered that a person might be more flexible when entering a narrow cave, so he put away the dew grass and went in alone. However, he just realized that he did not take into account Mao Mao's feelings. He did regard Lu Kao as a true partner, so he subconsciously didn't want Mao Mao to take risks. But he forgot that the cat was willing to follow him because he wanted to take risks with him, not to be cared for like a pet. Moreover, Lu cat has its own thoughts and will. Lu Kao does not want to become a pet, but a real fighting partner. Su Yi's approach obviously ignores the real thoughts of the cat. Su Yi and I are partners, so naturally we have to act together, meow. Lu Kao said, raising her cat's paw. Well, there won't be a next time. Su Yi smiled and stretched out his palm to give Cat Claw a high five. Then next, Su Yi was about to return like this. Because of the arrival of the breeding season, the monsters in the forest became extremely sensitive and restless, and there was also a vindictive barbarian jaw dragon looking for him. Continuing to explore will inevitably cause trouble. But the more I thought about it, the more unwilling I felt. I came here to look for traces and was hunted by monsters. I didn't catch anything, which was very frustrating. We can't just stagnate and try to find it again. If we don't take risks, what's the point of taking risks? With that said, Su Yi opened the map of the hunting guide and marked the cave of the fierce jackal dragon. Aibo, let's go. The real hunting has just begun. Meow. Carefully bypassing the woods where the barbarian jaw dragon and the female fire dragon had previously faced off, Su Yi and Mao Mao arrived outside the cave of the big ferocious jackal dragon. Next to the tree that was knocked down by the big ferocious jackal dragon, there was a pool of blood, broken yellow-green scales, some crawling marks, and most importantly, the corpse of a herbivorous dragon that had been digested to a bloody pulp. The big ferocious jackal dragon is not dead, but it is almost alive. In order to escape, it vomited out the food it had eaten to reduce its burden. This crawling trace points to here. Su Yi analyzed calmly, and the hunter knowledge in his mind was gradually integrated into the application. Su Yi's thinking suddenly became clear. Guide worm, let's go. Su Yi made the guide worm stick to these traces, memorizing the aura of the ferocious jackal dragon. The green guide insect followed the breath and guided Su Yi towards the interior of the forest. Under the guidance of the guide insect, Suyi walked flexibly through the forest, and from time to time collected some materials with the help of the guide insect. The distance is close. Suyi slowed down, pushed aside the trees, and saw several herbivorous dragons eating plants in a clearing in the forest. A large and ferocious jackal dragon with shocking scars all over its body appeared in its yellow-green color. With the help of body color, it hides its figure and slowly approaches the prey. The ferocious jackal dragon that used to rush forward to kill its prey with bared teeth and claws was now so cautious. It can be seen that its injury has seriously affected its hunting, and in turn its life. Ouch! When it could no longer lurk any closer, the ferocious jackal climbed out with all its strength, and the herbivorous dragon panicked and ran away. The ferocious jackal dragon barely caught up with the old and weak herbivorous dragon and opened its mouth to bite. The opportunity has come. At that moment, Suyi raised his left arm, and the projector loaded with flying walnuts was instantly activated. Snapped. The solid flying walnuts shot at the side of the big ferocious jackal dragon, and then exploded and flew away. There were bloodstains there after being bitten by the barbarian jaw dragon. This blow immediately hit the pain point. Ouch! Woohoo! The big ferocious jackal dragon roared in pain, its voice mixed with weakness. Go, Ibo! Suyi rushed out of the bushes and loaded the projector again. His sudden appearance immediately attracted the hatred of the big ferocious jackal dragon. With a fierce look in its eyes, the big ferocious jackal dragon turned and crawled towards Suyi. On the other side, Lu Kao rushed out from the bushes on the other side, and the bone dagger in his hand lit up with the light of his moves. Base. Mau Mau attacked and immediately hit the wound on the side of the big ferocious jackal, causing it to roar in pain and turn sideways to bite Lu Kao. At the same time, Suyi fired flying walnuts again, attracting the attention of the great fierce jackal dragon. In this way, the great fierce jackal dragon, whose mobility was greatly reduced due to serious injuries, was immediately in a situation of being attacked from both sides. Ouch! 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 The ferocious jackal dragon lost its position for a moment, and it was difficult to see its head and tail. The loss of strength and the worsening of its injuries made its roar full of anxiety. But Suyi was not in a hurry at all. He and Lu Sao did not rush forward to attack, but just carried out a trapped beast fight. The one who should be worried the most is the ferocious jackal dragon. As its life is beginning to be threatened, it begins a crazy attack without hesitation. However, its mobility was greatly reduced and it could no longer run fast. Suyi tensed up his nerves and kept walking, always keeping a distance from the ferocious jackal dragon. The ferocious jackal seemed to know that he could not kill them, so he plunged into the woods. HMPH. Want to escape? Suyi adjusted the projector while running towards the ferocious jackal dragon. Aha! There was a flash of silver light. The flying claw was launched by Suyi, hitting the target with a click, and the hook claw was firmly fixed on the back of the big fierce jackal dragon. The next moment, Suyi activated the flying claw, and the rope pulled him to fly and ride on the big fierce jackal dragon. Sensing that there was a creature lying on its back, the big ferocious jackal dragon rammed sideways towards a big tree. Suyi took out a hand sword and stabbed it hard into the big ferocious jackal dragon's back. Due to lack of strength, it only penetrated a section. The tip of the blade, however, fixed Suyi, allowing him to lie firmly on the back of the ferocious jackal dragon amid the shock of the impact. Seeing that the impact was ineffective, the ferocious jackal stopped paying attention to Suyi. Instead, it ran wildly, trying to scrape off Suyi with dense branches. Behind the monster, Dewgrass chased after him on all fours. Ibo, come in first. Suyi twisted around and held the capture ball, collecting Lu Sao who was running behind him into the ball. Then, he released the dewgrass on the back of the big ferocious jackal dragon again. Let's make a scene. Ibo, Suyi shouted. Lu Kao responded equally vigorously. I know, meow. As he spoke, Lu Kao raised his bone blade high, activated his moves, and began to slash at the back of the ferocious jackal dragon. Ouch! Ouch! The continuous pain made the big ferocious jackal dragon stagger, and seriously injured, the big ferocious jackal dragon fell to the ground with a mournful cry. Chapter 11. About there. Seeing the ferocious jackal lying on the ground without even the strength to struggle, Suyi knew that the time had come. Lucky egg, I'll leave it to you. Suyi released the lucky egg. Based on the injuries of the ferocious jackal, if its injuries are not treated in time after being captured, it may be a disaster, so the auspicious eggs are released to be ready for treatment at any time. Go. Capture the ball. Su Yi held the red and white ball tightly, threw it lightly, and hit the ferocious jackal. The capture ball was opened, and the big ferocious jackal was enveloped by the light emitted from the ball, and then was sucked into the ball. Buzz. The capture ball trembled heavily. Su Yi clenched his fists, even more nervous than when he had just ridden the ferocious jackal dragon, because at this moment, there were only 7 capture balls left in his body. 5 were used to support the initial mission, 5 were rewarded for completing the mission, 1 was used to hold down the dragon, 1 was used to collect the dew grass, and 1 was used to bring the auspicious egg. When there is no channel to capture the ball for the time being, 1 less ball is used to capture the ball. 7 seemed like a lot, but the possibility of failure had to be considered, so Su Yi didn't want to waste any of them. Buzz. The capture ball trembled again. Stop struggling, you're already like that. Su Yi whispered, as if to persuade the ferocious jackal dragon not to be ignorant of good and evil. Buzz. The vibration of the catch ball is noticeably lessened. Su Yi held his breath and stared at the captured ball. Bang. The capture ball no longer vibrates and everything is calm. But at this moment, Su Yi couldn't calm down inside. Su Yi walked forward quickly and picked up the big ferocious jackal dragon's capture ball. He held the red and white ball tightly, took a deep breath, and did what he had only dreamed of when he was young and innocent. Su Yi held the ball high with one hand and grinned, "Big fierce jackal dragon. Get da zi. Meow." Lucky. Lu Kao and Jilidan came over and cheered happily for Su Yi together. Finally, Su Yi breathed a sigh of relief. After relaxing, fatigue and soreness suddenly surged from his body. This was his first true subjugation. Lu Kao trusted him and followed him actively, and Jilidan helped him out of kindness. The two were not subjugated by battle at all. At first, when he returned to this world, he just wanted Lu Kao and his friends to report that they were safe, say goodbye, and tame small monsters such as herbivorous dragons or crested dragons to slowly plan. Unexpectedly, the first time he conquered the herbivorous dragon, he was cut off by the fierce jackal dragon. Then he chased the seriously injured jackal dragon, and was approached by the former barbarian jaw dragon. No one has this luck. This made Su Yi, who got the golden finger, quite frustrated. It's not that I'm pretentious, or that I'm eager for success, but I think that I have such an advantage, and even have the hunter knowledge instilled by golden finger, but I repeatedly hit the wall, which hit Su Yi. Then when he tracked down the ferocious jackal, as an adult, Su Yi forced himself to calm down and began to think carefully about countermeasures. This happened to allow him to begin to integrate the knowledge of those hunters. After calming down and making up his mind, Su Yi quickly got into the mood with the help of basic hunter knowledge. And then riding on the big ferocious jackal dragon was just because I was in a hurry. If the big ferocious jackal dragon ran away and I spent more time tracking it, I might run into something wrong. To avoid long nights and endless dreams, Su Yi simply tried to use hunter's methods to hunt the ferocious jackal. However, this was only based on the fact that the ferocious jackal dragon himself was seriously injured before Su Yi dared to do that. Even so, now that he recalled his bold behavior just now, Su Yi broke into a cold sweat. However, this incident also made Su Yi understand a truth. Hunters naturally need to be cautious when hunting, but they must also be brave and decisive. After Su Yi recovered most of his strength, he took out the capture ball and released the ferocious jackal dragon. A monster more than 10 meters long appeared lying on the grass. Su Yi couldn't help but sigh. Even among the large monsters, the existence with the lowest ecological niche, the great ferocious jackal dragon's physique was not comparable to that of ordinary creatures. The ferocious jackal dragon with a low aura suddenly roared vigilantly and weakly when he saw Su Yi. He looked very pitiful, but Su Yi would not let down his vigilance. Monsters are different from Pokémon. After a Pokémon is subdued, most of them will not kill the trainer even if they are dissatisfied with the trainer, because Pokémon have the concept that after being subdued, they must accept the command of the trainer. But monsters don't. In their eyes, you are a creature that imprisons them. If conditions permit, they will naturally show their fangs and claws to resist. Therefore, after subduing the monsters, Su Yi still had to tame them. Relax. Su Yi threw a pomelo fruit towards the ferocious jackal dragon. The big ferocious jackal dragon took a step back warily, looked at the fruit, and then looked at Su Yi. Su Yi always felt that there was scrutiny in the eyes of the fierce jackal. Communicating with monsters seemed to be a fantasy, but at this moment, Su Yi had a feeling that the ferocious jackal dragon that had been subdued could communicate. Su Yi took out a pomelo fruit based on his feeling, and then ate it in front of the fierce jackal dragon. The ferocious jackal thought for a while, then opened his mouth and swallowed the pomelo fruit. The tree fruit that restored physical strength had an immediate effect on the dangerous jackal who had acquired the Pokémon trait, and it immediately felt the physical strength restored. The big ferocious jackal dragon took a step forward and opened its mouth to scream, as if it was hungry for more fruits. Here's more. As he said that, Su Yi threw out another tree fruit to restore physical strength, and this time the ferocious jackal dragon ate it without hesitation. Taking this opportunity, Su Yi slowly approached the fierce jackal dragon. The big ferocious jackal dragon raised its head after eating the fruit, saw Su Yi approaching, and pawed uneasily. Su Yi could only subconsciously imitate the appearance of the animal trainer he saw in his previous life. He threw a fruit with one hand for the big ferocious jackal dragon to catch, and slowly stretched out his other hand to touch it. Unexpectedly, the ferocious jackal retreated uneasily and roared a warning. Seeing this, Lu Sao clenched the bone dagger and used Mau Mau attack, letting the dagger shine with the light of the move, blocking Su Yi. Don't even think about hurting Su Yimiao. Su Yi sighed and said, it seems that it still needs some patience to tame it. At least it doesn't want to kill me directly. Gili Egg, use the healing wave to heal it. Lucky. Jilidan nodded and used the healing wave on the ferocious jackal dragon. A faint light enveloped the ferocious jackal dragon. Because the injury was too serious, the auspicious egg continued to heal for a period of time. Finally, after expending a lot of energy from Jilidan, the wounds on the fierce jackal dragon began to heal, leaving scars that were beginning to heal. The great ferocious jackal dragon felt its body recover, and its tense body relaxed a little. Su Yi threw out a few pieces of herbivorous dragon meat that were originally reserved food from the item and gave them to the fierce jackal dragon. The big ferocious jackal dragon ate these large pieces of meat in one bite, and then subconsciously walked towards the lair. We're back near the nest again. Su Yi then realized that when he was hunting the ferocious jackal dragon, the target of its escape was the nest. Open the map and find that the nest is near them. The big ferocious jackal climbed near the entrance of the cave, but did not go in. Instead, it looked at it for a few times, and then looked at Su Yi. How do you feel? It seems to have become a little smarter. Su Yi always felt that there was something in the eyes of the fierce jackal dragon. Maybe it's because it turned into a Pokémon. Su Yi could only guess this way. After all, Pokémon all have high IQs. Su Yi shook his head and put the ferocious jackal dragon back into the ball. At this time, the guide insects on the waist flew to a pile of things outside the cave. These are the scales and feathers of the scratched bird, as well as blood stains. It must be from the one bitten by the barbarian jaw dragon. Su Yi said. Buzz. With a soft groan, Su Yi took off the hunting manual from his waist with a sigh, and the blue star on the cover flashed with blue light. He opened the book, flipped through the pages, and reached the task page. Suddenly, a symbol for an investigation report appeared. Su Yi clicked on it and took a look. Task: hunting and tickling birds. Mission support: none. Mission reward: 5 capture balls and 2 trap tools. Limited time: 3 days. This is triggering an investigation mission. Su Yi carefully looked at this first task besides the initial task. Su Yi found that he could choose whether to accept the mission. If he gave up the mission, or if no relevant clues about the target were traced within 3 days after accepting the mission, he would lose the mission and would not be able to return from there in the next 3 days. Obtain the task again from a target. Accept or not, Su Yi began to analyze the situation. Now, he had conquered the ferocious jackal dragon, and he was able to win it so easily only with the help of the male fire dragon, sea dragon and barbarian jaw dragon. Although the scratching bird was also attacked by the barbarian jaw dragon, Su Yi was not sure how badly the scratching bird was injured. Before Su Yi tamed the great ferocious jackal dragon, it was just an unstable combat force that was hard to count on, and the barbarian jaw dragon was also eyeing him. Therefore, Su Yi was considering whether to take some risks to complete this mission, or to go directly back to the Pokemon world to reorganize his team before going. Let's check out the specific situation of the tickling bird before making a plan. Anyway, there is no loss in failure, and the tickling bird will not actively attack people, just pay attention to other monsters. Su Yi decided that this was also an opportunity. If he waited a few days and returned, Ticklebird could recover his strength and injuries. It would be difficult to deal with Ticklebird, who was good at escaping. Let's work together, Su Yi encouraged himself. Do you want to continue hunting? Meow. Lu Kao didn't show any signs of fatigue, but was full of interest. Su Yi looked at the time, and then used the guide insect to guide the scratching bird away. Just after Su Yi and Lu Sao left here for a while, the vicious thugs walked slowly with heavy steps. The Magnathus released its nose crown and sniffed the ground for traces of scratching birds. Suddenly, a familiar smell wafted into the nose. Roar! The barbarian jaw dragon roared loudly, its eyes flashing with excitement. It picked up the scent and quickened its pace to chase after it. The ancient tree forest environment is complex. The towering ancient tree contains rainwater and soil inside, and its complex and changeable giant trees form a unique ecological environment. Su Yi, who was following the traces of scratching birds, began to head towards the ancient giant tree. Lightworm, a good thing. Su Yi stepped lightly and used a net bag to catch a lightworm that looked like a large firefly on the trunk of the tree. The products on the ancient giant trees are really rich. No wonder in the game, plant researchers use the larvae of the ancient giant trees to establish a culture base that can efficiently produce various insects, plants and fungi materials. Su Yi, who did not forget to collect materials along the way, gained a lot for a while. Following the guidance of the guide insect, Su Yi climbed up from the thick roots of the ancient giant tree along the vines growing on the tree. You can run so far even after being hurt. You can really jump, Su Yi muttered. With the help of the hook rope launched by the projector, Su Yi climbed up the tree trunk. The abundant rainwater accumulated by the ancient giant tree flowed and gathered along the complex structural environment inside the tree, forming countless creeks and flowing along the channels formed by the trees and soil. A forest of ancient trees that eventually flows into the sea. In front of Su Yi, there was such a small stream. The interior of the ancient giant tree is layered and has a complex structure. Countless animals and plants live in the structure of the tree, which seems to have become another small world. Various plant and insect materials can often be seen. Something's coming, meow. Lu Sao immediately warned when he saw the insect guide beside Su Yi suddenly retracting the insect guide tank on his waist. Su Yi, who was walking along the stream to the inside of the ancient giant tree, paused suddenly, then stepped back step by step, cold sweat dripping down his face. A monster with light blue scales and white hair, like a cheetah on all fours, walked slowly from the tree trunk passage on the side with quiet steps. It's a flying thunder dragon. Su Yi secretly thought that he was not careful, but he was also glad because, except for the main plot, usually the flying thunder dragon is a kind of monster that will not take the initiative to attack the hunter. A man and a dragon met at the intersection of trees. The flying thunder dragon looked at Su Yi with its snake-like head. While its steps paused, its snake-like vertical pupils stared at Su Yi warily. After seeing Su Yi take the initiative to retreat and get out of the way, Fei Long walked out of the passage while looking at Su Yi. He didn't look away until he was some distance away and disappeared among the lush branches and leaves of the ancient giant tree. Ha! Su Yi let out a long breath. Although in the game, the flying thunder dragon will not take the initiative to attack the hunter, in fact, there is no guarantee that there will be any exceptions. The distance between the two parties just now was too close. With the flying thunder dragon's agility, if it suddenly attacks, he couldn't even hide in time, it was very dangerous. The 4 sharp claws of the flying thunder dragon have meat pads, which can cushion and silence the sound, and it is also very quiet. It is like a jaguar hunting in the dense forest, silent, so Su Yi did not notice it at the first time. The presence. Fortunately, the flying thunder dragon did not regard him as an enemy. After the near-miss encounter, Su Yi passed through the tree tunnel and began to move towards the middle layer of the ancient giant tree. The ancient giant tree was hollow inside, and the trees grew into a spiraling wooden road leading directly to the top of the tree, like a spiral tower made of trees. However, The trace of the scratching bird traced by the guide insect is actually still going upward. Su Yi said in surprise. The scratching bird's nest shouldn't be so high. The fire dragon's territory is up here. Does the tickling bird go to such a high place in the ancient tree forest? What is it doing? Su Yi was puzzled. The ecological niche of bird tickling was not high, and he was cautious by nature. How could he venture to the upper level of the dangerous ancient tree forest? Putting aside his doubts for the time being, Su Yi continued to follow the traces of the scratching bird, but he was more cautious. As the altitude increased, several pterosaurs stayed on the branches inside the giant tree. A large gap was exposed in the wall of the tree in front, showing the scenery outside the giant tree. Aibo, come here quickly. There is a wonderful view ahead. Su Yi trotted to the edge of the tree trunk platform and looked out at the distant scenery from inside the ancient giant tree. Here you go, meow. Lu Sao trotted over expectantly, standing side by side with Su Yi and looking out. Under the blue sky, several pterosaurs were chirping and flying leisurely. Below was a green and boundless sea of trees, lush tall trees, forest clearings with herbivorous dragons gnawing on vegetation, and open small spaces. Lakes, streams running through the forest, a vast forest containing countless different scenery. Looking to the south, there is the endless sea adjacent to the ancient tree forest. Looking to the east, one can see star strongholds dotted among the cliffs and rocks, forming a base of large ships. The waterfalls flowing down the cliffs drive huge water wheels. The power generated by the water wheels is transmitted to various parts of the stronghold where kinetic energy is needed. The place. Further east from the star stronghold is the desolate wasteland of the Big Ant Mound. Looking to the north, the cliffs towering like thousands of stone blades and the deep and desolate ravines and canyons isolate the ancient trees and forests. The interior surrounded by towering rock walls is a three-dimensional ecology that combines the coral platform and the miasma valley structure. Su Yi squinted his eyes and looked to the far north, where the strong men gathered, the place where the dragon crystals gathered, where the earth veins converged, and the end of the Styx River. All of a sudden, half to 60% of the new world's landforms were covered. Suddenly it becomes clear, the world is vast, the breeze blows, and I feel relaxed and happy. This is how Su Yi feels at this moment, like climbing a mountain and looking at the stunning scenery. But this spectacle is unique to this world. The soul dyed gray by the steel jungle was suddenly covered with beauty as beautiful as this spectacle. Aibo, have you seen such a scenery before? Su Yi asked with a chuckle. Without meow, I have always been a meow at the bottom and outside of the forest. The cat's big watery eyes wanted to take in all the scenery. I'm so happy, meow. I finally saw the whole picture. It turns out that this is the ancient tree forest, meow. Lu Cao danced happily. The star stronghold over there, meow. That's the great ant mound wasteland over there, meow. It turns out that there is a completely different scene further north in the ancient tree forest, meow. Over there, and over there. What else is there, meow? The cat looked at this vast and unknown world, its big eyes full of curiosity and longing, and its paws restlessly pointed at the scenery, like it's wanting to go to that unknown world right away to find out what's going on. And why isn't Su Yi in the same state of mind? Su Yi smiled and said, this is just the beginning. I promised you, Aibo, we will definitely go and find out. Meow. Lu Cao jumped up high and meowed in anticipation. Yes, this is just the beginning. The Ant Mound Stone Forest and Desert Oasis in the Big Ant Mound Wasteland, the remains of the Snake King and the Sour Water Yellow Spring in the Miasma Valley, the Coral Forest on the Coral Terrace, Ryunshan Peak, and the crystallized land of the Dragon Crystal Land, heart of Leyline. The freezing ice fields, the island of origin, there will always be that day. Suppressing his surging mood and keeping his feet on the ground, Su Yi once again set his goal on chasing birds. But the strange moving route of the tickling bird made Su Yi hesitate. Further up was the crown of the ancient giant tree, including Su Yi's current location, which was already the territory of the fire dragon. What is this scratching bird going to do? Su Yi murmured. Roar! A soul-stirring roar suddenly came from outside the ancient giant tree. Su Yi carefully approached the gap in the tree wall and looked out, only to see a female fire dragon roaring and flying quickly towards the crown of the tree. What happens? Roar! Another roar, this time coming from the canopy. An incredible idea suddenly appeared in Su Yi's mind. That scratching bird must be trying to steal the fire dragon's eggs. Su Yi was shocked by his own thoughts. How could he be so bold as to scratch the bird, and he was not, the king of all battles, scratching the bird. Roar, boom boom. Above the tree crown, the furious roar of the fire dragon was heard frequently, accompanied by the sound of roaring and exploding flames. Has it been discovered? Just when Su Yi was about to retreat to avoid being affected by the fish pond, a light yellow figure hurriedly trotted out from the passage leading to the tree crown. Tickling bird. That's what it's holding. Su Yi watched in disbelief as the scarred scratching bird ran towards here holding a huge egg. If you have time to go back to the world, you can climb ancient giant trees, admire desert ant mounds, admire the remains of the Snake King, walk in the sea of coral trees, challenge the fire-thirsty dragon, soak in a hot spring in the ice and snow, or travel to the end of the world with your beloved. The injured scratching bird excitedly held the huge egg and ran along the tree passage toward the lower level of the ancient giant tree. But the strange thing is that there is no fire dragon chasing down, but the fighting above the canopy intensifies. Something's wrong. The injuries on the scratching bird should have been caused by the barbarian jaw dragon before. It stole the fire dragon's egg without any injuries. Then what are the fire dragon couple fighting up there? Su Yi was dumbfounded as he watched the scratching bird pass by him happily holding the fire dragon egg. The scratching bird glanced at Su Yi warily. Seeing that Su Yi didn't move and looked at it with some surprise, the scratching bird called out, as if to say, "Are you serious about scratching my brother?" Then he continued running towards the tree. Roar, hooray, boom. The sound of fierce fighting coming from the tree crown woke Su Yi. Absolutely amazing. There is such a bold tickling bird, he actually took advantage of the chaos and stole the fire dragon egg. Without saying anything, Su Yi quickly caught up with tickling bird and stayed away from this land of right and wrong. What dares to offend the fire dragon couple? First of all, exclude the ancient dragon, because almost all monsters will avoid the ancient dragon, and they are not land-based monsters, because the road I took is the only road leading to the canopy, but the guide insect found no trace of other monsters, so we can only it's a flying dragon monster that's good at flying. Su Yi was thinking in his heart while following the flirtatious bird. Will the sudden appearance of an unknown enemy pose a threat to him? What changes will its appearance bring to ancient tree forests? These will have an impact on his exploration activities, so he has to pay attention to them. Could it be the explosive scale dragon? Su Yi immediately thought of this New World policeman. No, it doesn't sound like the scream. Su Yi shook his head and denied. The roars of the monsters all have certain characteristics. Although Su Yi did not remember most of the monsters' roars, the exception was the exploding scale dragon. Everyone knows it. When it carried the speakers and barged in, it was hard not to remember its roar. That roar with a high nasal sound once made Su Yi unforgettable for a long time. Then what kind of monster could it be? Su Yi was puzzled. Putting their doubts in their hearts, Su Yi and Lu Sao followed the scratching bird's footsteps and came to a narrow tree-hole passage. There should be a scratching bird's nest ahead. Looking at the terrain that seemed to be gradually entering a nest, Su Yi and Mao Mao became cautious. At the corner of the passage, Su Yi quietly stuck his head out and looked inside. He saw the scratching bird placing the fire dragon eggs in the nest, and then began to select from several eggs of different types in the nest. Su Yi took his head back, feeling anxious and having a headache at the same time. How to subdue the tickling bird while protecting the fire dragon egg? That's right, Su Yi is very greedy for the fire dragon egg now, not because he wants to eat it, but because he wants to hatch it as his accompanying beast. This is the closest chance he has to getting the fire dragon egg. In the materials collected, there is no way to make a tickling bird fall asleep. Su Yi thought and suddenly patted his head. I'm not just a hunter, I'm also a Pokémon trainer. Su Yi excitedly released the auspicious egg. Lucky, Geely Dan greeted energetically. Meow, Cat responded with a cute paw. Please, Geely egg, use singing. Su Yi said, recalling the Geely egg's moves he had seen in the accompanying beast column. Lucky, Geely egg waved his hand and then started singing. The simple melody spread with a strange hypnotic power. When the bird heard the song, he screamed and looked towards the passage behind him. Karma, the scratching bird made a confused cry and then walked towards the passage next to the nest. At the same time, outside the scratching bird's nest, the barbarian jaw dragon paced over while sniffing the scent. Suddenly, a burst of singing came from a tree hole, and it sniffed hard with its towering nose, and immediately smelled the smell it had been pursuing in that tree hole. The barbarian jaw dragon roared excitedly, and then crashed into the tree hole arrogantly. Just when the scratching bird saw the auspicious egg in the corner, there was a loud bang and wood chips flew everywhere. The barbarian jaw dragon broke through the not-thick trees and rushed in. Wow! Wow! The scratching bird screamed, and most of the inexplicable sleepiness that had just arisen suddenly disappeared. It turned around, picked up an egg, and ran away. It's it again, meow. Lu Kao said in surprise. Egg. Su Yi had sharp eyes and could tell at a glance that what the scratching bird took away in a panic was the fire dragon's egg. Roar. The barbarian jaw dragon didn't care about scratching the bird, but opened its mouth and bit at Su Yi. What kind of hatred? Su Yi took back the lucky egg, turned around and ran away angrily, with Mau Mau following closely behind. Boom! The barbarian jaw dragon violently destroyed the tree hole and rushed towards Su Yi. Still chasing. I think you want to eat rice. Su Yi took out the props and quickly loaded them on the projector. Hey, hey, hey. Su Yi turned on the camera, and a dark yellow ball exuding a foul smell was shot towards the head of the barbarian jaw. Roar! The barbarian jaw dragon turned its head suddenly, and the stink bomb missed. You are well prepared. Su Yi was very surprised when he saw the agile dodge of the barbarian jaw dragon. At the same time, he reloaded the ammunition without delay. Roar! The barbarian jaw dragon became furious instantly, the skin at its throat glowed red, and sparks flew from its sharp teeth. Now, Su Yi aimed again and shot. The stink bomb hit the crown of the nose of the Magnathus. Immediately, a strong stench blocked its nasal cavity, seriously interfering with its ability to smell odors. The barbarian jaw dragon has a fierce look in its eyes and is persistent. I don't have time to mess around with you. Su Yi loaded the projector again. Go blind. As he fired the flash bomb, a violent flash of light erupted in front of the brutal jaw dragon. The intense light made the brutal jaw dragon dizzy, and its vision was temporarily taken away. Amidst the helpless and furious roar of the barbarian jaw dragon, Su Yi gradually ran away. Buzz. Away from the furious monster, the guide insect started working again, but after this interruption, the guide insect's tracking of the bird began to become intermittent. Can we still find it? Su Yi frowned, and at the same time, he began to have no expectations for the fire dragon egg. Because the egg is likely to be eaten by the bird. Bad luck. Su Yi cursed secretly. Meow. It's scratching the bird's feathers, meow. The sharp-eyed Lu Kao suddenly discovered the yellow feathers among the vines. Well done. Su Yi quickly stepped forward to let the guide insect track. However, the more Su Yi followed, the more he felt something was wrong. Why are you back? It turned out that they were following the scratching bird and found that it actually circled around and ran back to its original nest. Walking into the nest, except for 1 or 2 broken eggs, several other eggs were missing. You actually know how to secretly come back to transfer food. This is really unusual. Following the trace again, Su Yi came to the broad trunk of a big tree. The scratching bird was eating eggs selflessly in the tree hole, and there were a few eggs around it as food reserves. It's still there. Su Yi immediately discovered the biggest egg, which was the fire dragon egg. Aibo, please, leave it to me, meow. Meow meow. Attack. Meow meow raised the bone dagger that lit up with his move and jumped down. The cat jumped down and immediately attracted the attention of the bird. Wow. Tickled bird called out suspiciously, turned his head and looked up, and what was coming towards him was Mau Mau's dagger that lit up with white light. Base. Sharp blade slashes hard. The scratching bird staggered back amid the screams, its sharp claws loosened, and the half-eaten egg smashed to the ground with a crack, and the egg liquid flowed all over the floor. Karma. The scratched bird stared at the broken egg on the ground with his eyes wide open, his expression full of disbelief and inability to accept it. Taking advantage of the moment of being stunned, Su Yi also jumped down, quickly rushed to the pile of eggs with his hands and feet, and quickly held the fire dragon egg in his arms. Hey, it's quite heavy. Su Yi took a deep breath and lifted the egg in his arms. When he regained consciousness and came to scratch the bird, he immediately noticed Su Yi, the egg thief. He first disturbed it while eating, scattered its food, and finally even took away the delicious meal that it planned to save until the end. Quack quack. The scratching bird was angry. It stiffened its neck, hissed, and at the same time arched its body, getting ready for a fight. Come out, fierce jackal dragon. If it were before, Su Yi might still have some scruples, but it's different now. A green lizard more than 10 meters long lay across the tree hole, making the space seem much smaller for a moment. Roar! The big ferocious jackal roared loudly, releasing the boredom of being locked in the ball. The angry scratching bird ignored the strange appearance of the big ferocious jackal. It rushed forward in 2 steps, swiping its claws left and right. The fierce jackal dragon, get away quickly. Su Yi tried to command. Ouch! Naturally, the ferocious jackal dragon, which had no concept of a trainer at all, didn't care about that. When it saw the bird showing its intention to attack, it naturally regarded it as an object to vent its frustration and anxiety. Facing the scratching bird's claws, the ferocious jackal opened its mouth and bit back to fight back. Bang! Neither party got a good deal. The ferocious jackal dragon was recovering from its serious injury. The wound on its body opened again due to this attack, and another bite wound on the scratching bird's body was added. Not to be outdone, both sides roared loudly, their claws and jaws ready to move, ready to attack. Su Yi helplessly held up his forehead. We can't go on like this. This is a good opportunity. The 2 sides are evenly matched. I'm going to try to make the big ferocious jackal dragon obey my command. Su Yi looked serious, and the projector on his wrist was loaded quickly. The 2 monsters fought again, without any skills, relying entirely on wild instincts. After a round of attacks, the 2 injured monsters gasped and faced each other, looking for the next opportunity to strike. Call out! Snapped. Suddenly, a stone was shot behind the big ferocious jackal dragon. The big ferocious jackal dragon screamed and looked back angrily. I saw Su Yi lifting the projector with one hand and holding the big ferocious jackal dragon's capture ball with the other. He looked solemn and shouted loudly, "You should be able to understand what I say." As early as Su Yi conquered the great ferocious jackal, the humanized demeanor shown by the great ferocious jackal made Su Yi somewhat doubtful whether the monsters that had acquired the characteristics of Pokémon would really acquire the spirituality of Pokémon. With wisdom, Su Yi wants to confirm here. After hearing this, the fierce jackal dragon looked at Su Yi intently, his face looking like he was thinking or confused. Sure enough, this humanized expression is the best proof. Su Yi was delighted in his heart. This meant that it was possible to command monsters to fight, instead of simply fighting beasts. Quack! The scratching bird was stunned when it saw the ferocious jackal dragon. It lowered its head, tapped the ground with its beak, and used the sensitive sensing organs on its beak to detect the rocks under the ground. You must be very confused. You suddenly start to think about many things that you have never thought about before, some inexplicable powers in your body. What will you face in the future when you are locked in that ball? Su Yi saw the action of scratching the bird, his tone quickened. You can try to believe me. We will become partners fighting side by side, go to many places, experience many battles, and find the meaning of being like this together. Su Yi looked serious and expressed his hope with sincere emotions. The jackal believed in his wish. Call! The big ferocious jackal had doubts in its eyes, and then turned to look at the scratching bird. However, this time, it did not roar wildly, but stared thoughtfully at the restless scratching bird. The scratching bird in front of it finally found its target. It dug out a rock with its claws and held it between its claws. Su Yi clenched his fists and was in high spirits. He knew that he was already half successful. Ouch! The scratching bird got impatient, so it jumped up holding the hard rock and hit the big ferocious jackal on the head. The big ferocious jackal dragon knew that danger was coming. It scratched the ground with its sharp claws. It was about to move, but it suppressed it. Su Yi saw the opportunity and shouted, "Get back and avoid it." Ouch! The big ferocious jackal dragon roared in response, and its thick limbs jerked back a certain distance. The rock that scratched the bird hit hard in front of the big ferocious jackal dragon, stirring up flying dust. It's now. Mount Tai hits the top. Su Yi clenched his fist and punched the air. Ouch! The big ferocious jackal dragon raised its body, and suddenly a force awakened following Su Yi's instructions. That was the ability it suddenly acquired, but because it had never had this power before, it was in a fog and couldn't figure out the key. But as the name of the move was shouted, it seemed to have been guided and understood the secret to using that power. The big ferocious jackal raised its front body and aimed its flexible abdomen at the scratching bird in front of it. Suddenly, a white light shrouded its abdomen. It seemed that it was because it was not yet proficient, so the light and darkness were uneven, but this did not affect it at all. The power of the big fierce jackal dragon's attack is far beyond normal. Bang! The ferocious jackal dragon's full body strength and the blessing of his moves almost crushed the scratching bird and suffocated him with this blow. One of the two sides was seriously injured, and the other was recovering from the serious injury, but the bird-tickling dragon was more agile than the ferocious jackal dragon. However, the anger made Tickle Bird lose its mind, and it did not fully take advantage of it. Instead, the big ferocious jackal took advantage of its weight and used the Taishan pressing move to give Tickle Bird a heavy blow. Beautiful, Su Yi waved excitedly. The bird stood up tremblingly, the anger in its eyes dissipated a lot, and it realized that its condition was not good. Pursue the victory. The fierce jackal dragon, use bite. Su Yi naturally would not let go of the opportunity and commanded again. The big ferocious jackal dragon also responded immediately. It opened its huge mouth with sinister teeth. White light adhered to the teeth and extended a distance, making it even more ferocious and sharp. The big ferocious jackal dragon released its moves, biting fiercely. The bird screamed sadly, and the light yellow scales on its body were torn apart instantly. Just drag it out like this. Su Yi waved his hand. Call. The big ferocious jackal that bit the scratching bird to death exhaled white air, mustered up all its strength to twist its body, and drag the scratching bird in its mouth to the ground. With a bang, the bird screamed again and fell to the ground hard. Ouch! The ferocious jackal dragon, having exerted its power, let out a mighty roar. That's almost it. Today I'm going to get the stolen goods together. Su Yi took out the capture ball and aimed it at the fallen bird. I'm sorry that I have been busy at home these past 2 days. I was just buried today, so I am posting now. Please bear with me. By the way, the ringtone of the old feng shui master's cell phone is actually the Lonely Warrior, which is a bit difficult. Go. Capture the ball. Su Yi threw the ball confidently. He was so seriously injured that he should be unable to resist. Boom! The captured ball fell to the ground, and the ferocious jackal watched the process of capturing it intently. Buzz! The capture ball shakes. Buzz! The second time. Bang! The capture ball exploded, and the scratching bird dragged its seriously injured body and screamed feebly, looking like it would rather die than obey. Why? Su Yi didn't understand what Tickle Bird was insisting on. He released the auspicious egg and said, "Please, auspicious egg, use singing." Lucky. Gili Dan smiled and waved, singing a song with a simple and melodious tune. The hypnotic singing induces people to fall asleep. He is seriously injured and exhausted, scratching his eyelids and fighting, and gradually becomes unsteady on his feet. Why is this necessary? I won't take an egg from you, right? Su Yi couldn't help but feel helpless as he looked at Tickled Bird, who was still resisting tenaciously even though he was sleepy. I saw the scratching bird staring closely at the fire dragon egg that Su Yi put aside, as if he would not look away. Su Yi couldn't help but hold his forehead. How much he likes eggs. In the nest of the big ferocious jackal dragon, it first ate 2 or 3 eggs, and then carried one back to the nest. Generally, scratching birds will carefully pick up an egg, and then quickly run back to the nest to enjoy it. Obviously, this scratching bird is a glutton that loves eggs and even dares to steal the eggs of the fire dragon. Although it was able to succeed, it was because the fire dragon couple encountered an unknown powerful enemy and neglected protection. I can only throw the ball once more. Su Yi took out a capture ball again and held it in his hand. Judging from the current situation of Tickle Bird, if he were beaten again, it would probably be the last straw that broke the camel's back. And I don't know if it's because of the difference in power systems between the Monster Hunter world and the Pokémon world. These abnormal state moves have little effect on wary monsters. Su Yi could only try to catch the ball again. Lucky. Just when Su Yi was about to throw the ball, Gili Dan patted Su Yi with his short hand. What's wrong, Gili Egg? Su Yi looked down and saw Gili Egg patting his belly and looking at me. Under Su Yi's puzzled eyes, the lucky egg walked up to the scratching bird, took out the egg from his abdominal pocket, and then handed it over. Are you going to give it an egg? Su Yi looked at this scene in surprise. Lucky. The lucky egg saw the scratching bird looking at it in surprise, so he smiled and handed the egg to it again. Quack. The scratching bird's eyes lit up, then he eagerly picked up the egg and started pecking at it quickly. The description of the Geely egg in the illustration is, a nutritious egg. After evolving into a happy egg, it is even described that the egg can make creatures feel happy and calm down. In short, the egg from Geely egg seemed to suit the bird's appetite, and it quickly devoured the football-sized egg in 2 or 3 bites. Finally enjoying my favorite egg in its entirety, I felt relieved. Seriously injured, exhausted, and hypnotized by the previous moves and singing, all the negative conditions surged into his body as his spirit relaxed. Unable to hold on any longer, the body of Tiao now softened, and with an expression of no regrets about death, he's slowly falling to sleep. Does this scratching bird think that we are going to kill it, so it wants to taste the eggs one more time before dying? Su Yi suddenly thought of this possibility, and couldn't help but feel dumbfounded. Su Yi walked to the scratching bird, gently took the ball and tapped it. The scratching bird was instantly absorbed into the ball, without even a sign of struggle, and it was completely subdued. It has opened my eyes. Su Yi could only sigh. Sometimes, the desire for food can also become a motivation. He released the scratching bird again and let the auspicious egg release a healing wave to the sleeping scratching bird. After confirming that the injury was not serious, he took it back. After that, Su Yi opened the hunting guide, and saw that the task of hunting and tickling birds had been completed, and 5 capture balls were put into the item. Counting the previous consumption, the number of capture balls is now 9, and 2 trap tools that can be used to make traps have been obtained. There will be more means to use for subsequent captures. It's getting late. Let's go back to the beachside forest camp and spend the night before returning to the Pokémon world. Su Yi closed the guide and carefully walked through the forest while paying attention to the materials around him. As the sun set, the fire was blazing in the beachside camp. Su Yi lit the kerosene lamp left over from the old camp and illuminated the ingredients in front of him. Specialty mushrooms, bright flowers, sunflowers, herbivorous dragon meat, herbivorous dragon eggs, sashimi fish and some scattered wild vegetables and fruits, these are today's dinner. Su Yi rubbed his hands and sighed. The ancient tree forest is really rich in products. There is much to explore in this unexplored forest. It's the first time I've made cat rice. It feels a little strange. Su Yi operated the peeling knife and began to handle the ingredients awkwardly. In the past, Su Yi's cooking skills could only be regarded as average. After all, he didn't have much intention to get into these things. Now, he could only rely on the knowledge given by Golden Finger, operate it unfamiliarly, and try to slowly become familiar with this knowledge obtained out of thin air. I'm here to help, meow. Seeing that Su Yi was in a hurry, Lu Sao immediately ran over and worked with Su Yi to handle the ingredients and cook. Smoke curled up from the cooking pots, and the aroma gradually began to rise. Soon, portions of food were placed on the stone table. Grilled mushrooms, mushroom soup, fried cauliflower, barbecue steak, grilled fish, egg custard, fruit platter. It smells so good. Su Yi sniffed it, and his appetite suddenly whetted. The cat twitched its nose and exclaimed, "It's so rich, meow. Good things must be shared together, come out, everyone." Su Yi threw the ball, and the ferocious jackal, tickling birds, and auspicious eggs appeared in the camp one after another. Luck. Gilly Egg looked at the table full of food and smelled the aroma happily. Ouch. The ferocious jackal looked at the food with some doubts, but the smell that aroused his appetite immediately made his mouth secrete saliva unconsciously. Wow. The seriously injured scratching bird finally woke up. It opened its eyes and screamed when it saw Su Yi and his party. Don't get excited. Looking at the restless scratching bird, Su Yi immediately comforted him. Roar. The ferocious jackal roared, stretched out its sharp claws, and a bright green light of energy lit up on them, as if to warn the bird not to mess around. Just when the bird was in a panic, Su Yi picked up the large bowl of egg custard and walked over. We won't hurt you, do you want to taste it? Su Yi smiled and handed over the egg custard. The scratching bird smelled the aroma of eggs. It had just recovered from a serious injury. It had an empty belly and was in urgent need of food to replenish its energy. Smelling the alluring aroma, it moved closer unconsciously, drool dripping from the corner of its mouth. The big ferocious jackal put away its claws and silently crawled to Suyi's side to look at the scratching bird. Seeing the fierce jackal dragon taking the initiative to protect himself, Suyi grinned unconsciously and said, "Don't worry." Ouch! The bird couldn't resist the temptation anymore, so it picked up the egg custard and ate it. It finished the large bowl of egg custard with a few slurps, and smacked its lips, as if savoring the smooth, tender and sweet taste. Tickle bird, come and go on adventures with me in the future. You can eat all kinds of egg dishes, Suyi said with a smile. Karma. The scratching bird tilted its head and looked at the tent behind Suyi. The fire dragon egg it had stolen was wrapped in a bundle. Suyi coughed lightly and stretched out his hand to block the scratching bird's sight. Ahem, this one won't work. You have to think like this. This is so that you can go to more dangerous places and find better tasting eggs. The bird, whose intelligence had been improved, chirped, acting doubtful. Anyway, we will be partners from now on. Please give me your advice. Suyi reached out and touched the claws of the scratching bird. The scratching bird groaned softly, thought about his hobbies, and gently touched Suyi's hand with his paws. Ouch! The ferocious jackal shouted upon seeing this. Suyi picked up a large piece of barbecue and threw it towards the fierce jackal. Of course there is you. I will be counting on you from now on. Ouch! The big ferocious jackal swallowed the roasted meat in one gulp and licked its teeth, looking a little unsatisfied. Ha ha ha, not enough. Suyi took out some herbivorous dragon meat and eggs again and started cooking them again. The scratching bird and the big ferocious jackal dragon were waiting for Suyi to feed them, while the lucky egg had a special liking for the mushrooms, a specialty of the ancient tree forest, and the dew grass blew hard on the grilled fish to cool it down. There's no need to rush. Suyi looked at Mao Mao's anxious expression and smiled. This scene couldn't help but remind him of the cat rice animation in Monster Hunter World. Every time a hunter gets up after finishing a meal, the cat will look at the hunter who has finished eating in surprise, then look at the food that he has not finished eating, and hurriedly speed up to finish it. The big ferocious jackal dragon bit into a roasted herbivorous dragon leg and chewed it slowly, savoring the texture and taste that it had never savored in the past. The scratching bird pecked at the custard, slowly savoring this different and advanced way of eating. Gili Dan didn't eat much, so he ate early and admired the starry sky. The cat finally ate the grilled fish, meowing happily, and a pair of white gloves were stained with oil. Seeing this scene, Suyi couldn't help but feel relieved. Perhaps this was the chef's sense of satisfaction when he saw the satisfied expressions of the diners. I'm a little tired, but I'd better try to make more cat rice if I have the chance. I'll also look for opportunities to get some more kitchen utensils and seasonings. As the night grew darker, the big ferocious jackal dragon and the scratching bird were put into the ball to rest. The cat, who had been tired for a day, nestled in the tent and had already fallen asleep. Suyi sat on the stone bench outside the tent, looking at the clear night sky, feeling happy and excited. At this time, Suyi had time to carefully examine the harvest of these days. He opened the hunting guide and turned to the accompanying beasts list. The icons of the ferocious jackal dragon and the tickling bird twitched slightly. Name: Fierce Jackal Dragon. Race: Ferocious Jackal Dragon Male. Attribute: Dragon, Evil. Features: Powerful stomach acid eliminates the buff status of creatures swallowed and reduces defense, and the level of defense reduction will increase with time. Moves: Bite, Tarzan, Dragon Claw, Swallow exclusive move, Power 40, Evil attribute, Special move, swallows creatures of suitable size into the belly, and continues to cause damage others such as impact, scratching, shouting, etc. The basic moves will be omitted later. Carrying props: None. Obviously, the exclusive move of the great ferocious jackal is used in conjunction with its characteristics. It seems to be a powerful means of weakening the opponent's defense, but it also has two obvious weaknesses. First, the size is suitable. Due to the size of the great ferocious jackal, it can swallow most Pokémon, but for the large monsters in the monster hunting world, this move is useless for most of them. Second, Pokémon can use a variety of powerful moves, and swallowing them will undoubtedly put itself in danger. Even so, for now, the great ferocious jackal dragon is indeed one of Suyi's strongest accompanying beasts. Name: Tickling birds. Race: Tickling male. Attributes: Dragon, Flying. Features: Use local materials. Tickling bird can choose to condense it into hard rocks with different attributes according to the location. Moves: peck, random attack, crazy scratching, hard rock attack, exclusive move, power 95, rock attribute, physical move, condense a hard rock between the claws. The scratching bird will use the rock to attack and defend until rocks are discarded or broken. Tickling birds also has exclusive moves and characteristics that work together. Although the exclusive moves do not have the bonus of this type, the victory is that the power itself is relatively high. The most important thing is that it can restrain the ice type that is unfavorable to its own attributes, which is of great strategic significance. Using local materials, this feature relies on the location and is unstable, but fortunately, you can choose whether to use the location. On the other hand, this also gives the bird tickling's exclusive moves a certain degree of flexibility. Seeing the two large monsters becoming accompanying beasts, gaining the power of Pokémon, and harvesting a lot of materials from items, Suyi couldn't help but feel a little emotional. Originally, the goal of Suyi's exploration this time was to conquer small monsters such as herbivorous dragons or crown dragons, but he did not expect to find an opportunity to conquer large monsters later. Although there were twists and turns, in terms of results, the harvest this time far exceeded expectations, which gave him a lot of confidence to return to the Pokémon world to explore. This is hunting. It may be difficult at the beginning and the harvest will be meager, but as long as you seize the opportunity and hunt patiently, you will always gain something. Suyi continued to flip through the guide. The ecological report recorded some information about the creatures Suyi had encountered, including information on large monsters, small monsters, environmental creatures, and materials collected. However, taking a closer look, Suyi discovered the body lengths of the ferocious jackal dragons and scratching birds recorded in the report. This big ferocious jackal dragon is actually 1,380 centimeters long. This is a big gold maximum body length, Suyi said in surprise. No wonder it feels so big when you get close. The body length of the scratching bird is mediocre, 902 centimeters, neither big nor small, medium length. A good start is half the success. Seeing the harvest of this exploration, Suyi went into the tent to sleep with satisfaction. Walking further north from the seaside forest camp, the trees disappear and are replaced by a sea cliff. In front of the cliff, tall sea rock pillars stand. In the game, some monsters will jump on these tall rock pillars to change zones. Suyi, you are here, meow. Lu Kao came over and saw Suyi looking towards the sea. Suyi pointed to the sea, and the sea breeze blew his hair. He stared at the other side of the sea and said, on the other side of the sea, there is eternal frost and frozen soil. Mau Mau widened his eyes and looked hard at the other side of the hazy sea fog. On the other side of the sea, is there mainland cat? Yes, but that's not what we're thinking about now. Suyi took a deep breath of fresh air and said with a smile, go back to the camp and pack your things. The exploration of another world is about to begin again. The cat shouted expectantly, let's go, meow. Coming to the Pokémon world again, the scenery in front of me changed from the primeval forest that blocked the sky to the low bushes. Suyi realized that he had returned to the Pokémon world and couldn't help but relax a little temporarily. At least he didn't have to worry about a monster that could suffocate him out from around the corner. Come out, Aibo, lucky egg. Another world, a new adventure begins, meow. The cat jumped up and down. Lucky. Seeing the familiar scenery, Jillidan felt nostalgic and lamented the wonderful adventures of the past few days. Suyi knelt down, looked at the lucky egg, and solemnly invited the lucky egg, Gilly Egg, come with me to go on an adventure. Lucky. Gilly Egg responded with a smile. Although he was worried about Suyi's injury at first and followed Suyi's request to go to the monster hunting world, the experience of just a few days made him discover what he liked. Obviously, Gilly Dan also likes the feeling of traveling around. Not only can he see different scenery, but he can also eat delicious specialties. And Suyi also valued the healing ability of the Gilly Egg. How could such a kind-hearted and healing Pokémon be a pink demon? But at this moment, a small group of Pokémon chirped around, all crying towards the lucky egg. Suyi took a closer look and found that all those coming were injured Pokémon. Recalling that when he first met the Gilly Egg, it was helping several Pokémon heal their injuries. Suyi couldn't help but wonder, are Pokémon so easily injured in the wild? Gilly Egg said worriedly. Lucky, while healing the Pokémon. Su Yi scratched his head after hearing this, he didn't understand it either. Lu Kao, who was listening on the sidelines, tilted his head and said, the Lucky Egg seems to be saying that there is a ferocious Pokémon in the forest that bullies the weak and steals food, meow. Su Yi asked in surprise. Aibo, can you understand what the Lucky Egg is saying? Lu Kao touched the cat's ears with her paws and said with a little uncertainty, I don't quite understand what it said specifically, meow, but I can understand the general meaning, meow. Su Yi then thought about it. Cats are now Pokémon. It is understandable that Pokémon can communicate with each other in a basic way. Looking at Gilly Dan, who was busy helping the injured Pokémon, Su Yi understood that as long as there were still Pokémon injured, the kind-hearted Gilly Dan would not rest assured to go on an adventure trip with him. So, Gilly Egg, let's go help you solve your trouble. Gilly Egg looked a little worried. Su Yi smiled and touched Gilly Dan's head and said, you helped me so much before, but now that you are in trouble, I naturally can't just sit back and watch. Walking along the forest path, a river passes through the woods. From time to time, a carp king jumps up in the river, and occasionally an ancient moon bird floats on the river with wise eyes. There are so many creatures I haven't seen before. Are these Pokémon cats too? Lu Kao followed Su Yi and looked around curiously. Yes, this is a world where most Pokémon can coexist harmoniously with humans. Being able to see all kinds of Pokémon made Su Yi's heart full of novelty and excitement. Lucky. The Lucky Egg stopped and pointed forward. In a bush growing with fruit, a centipede king patrolled his territory with a stern expression. It's King Centipede, a poison and insect-type Pokémon. Although it is a centipede, the Centipede King walks on four-jointed limbs. It does not have the centipedes in the traditional image of a centipede, and it does not lie on the ground like a centipede. Instead, it lifts its predecessor. Rather than saying that the prototype is a centipede, it is actually more like ancient creatures like millipedes. This King Centipede is so big, are you also a big gold? Su Yi said in amazement. The Centipede King strutting in the distance is said to be 2.8 meters tall and nearly 5 to 6 meters long. With this size, in the world of monster hunting, it can become a large monster. Since it has insect and poison attributes, it's up to you. Come on, Tickle Bird, prepare for your first battle. Su Yi sent out Dragon and Flying-type Tickle Bird. Wow, as soon as the Scratching Bird appeared, it carefully observed its surroundings. Tickle Bird, can you listen to my command and fight later? Su Yi stepped forward and touched the Tickle Bird's beak to comfort him. Gah, the bird called, not sure whether he understood it or not. The appearance of the Scratching Bird immediately attracted the attention of King Centipede. Although compared to King Centipede, the Scratching Bird looks slender, but after all, the body length of 9 meters is there. Cuckoo. King Centipede turned his head and pointed the two huge horns on his head at the tickling bird. The sudden intrusion of the creature in front of him immediately aroused its vigilance, and at the same time aroused its sense of territorial protection. Cuckoo. King Centipede ran quickly, the horn on his head lit up, and he hit the bird. Tickling the bird, avoid it. Karma. The cautious tickling bird naturally would not forcefully intercept it. It jumped lightly and nimbly dodged. Tick the bird, hit it hard with a rock. Su Yi saw the opportunity and ordered. However, the Scratching Bird did not obey the command. Instead, it stretched its neck and used its beak to peck at the flaw in the rear exposed by King Centipede because it had been dodged by a straight-line attack. Cuck. King Centipede did not panic, but twisted his tail. The two long tail spines behind him glowed with purple light, and he swept towards the tickling bird. Its poison tail. Su Yi recognized the move. The bird was careless in attacking because it was not familiar with Pokémon battles, causing it to be severely hit in the head by the poisonous tail. The bird screamed and retreated, and its expression gradually became a little angry. Fortunately, I wasn't poisoned. Su Yi breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that there were no signs of poisoning on the Scratching Bird. Tickle the bird. Follow my command. Fighting Pokémon is not as simple as your usual fights. Su Yi shouted. Gah. Tiaonao responded, his restless mood calming down. Cuckoo. King Centipede saw this and made a harsh sound. The Scratching Bird twisted its body irritably, and its defense was greatly reduced. Good guy, you really can't underestimate any Pokémon, especially this kind of individually powerful Pokémon. Su Yi's face was serious, and he was no longer as relaxed as when he promised the lucky egg at the beginning. Obviously, neither Tickling Bird nor Su Yi had actual experience in Pokémon battles, which made Su Yi's first official Pokémon battle a bit stressful. Since you don't have much experience, let's put strategies and on-the-spot responses aside first, and that's it. Scratch the bird. Hit hard with a solid rock. Su Yi patted his cheek, threw away the messy thoughts in his mind, and shouted loudly. Gah! The bird screamed in response to Su Yi's attack command. At the same time, its claws quickly scratched the ground. Dark yellow energy gathered from the ground to the claws, condensing into an energy rock. The bird jumped up high, holding the energy stone and smashing it on its head, but King Centipede groaned and quickly dodged. So fast. It's faster than at the beginning. Is it a hidden feature of acceleration? Su Yi was surprised by King Centipede's speed. Then throw the rock out. Su Yi suddenly had an idea. The Tickling Bird missed a hit, but after hearing the command, he immediately threw the energy rock in his hand skillfully. The Centipede King, who had just dodged the attack, was hit hard by the rock before he could stand still. The rock type restrained the insect system. This blow dealt huge damage. King Centipede roared in pain and propped himself up, his eyes even more fierce. One more time, Tickle the Bird, hit hard with a solid rock. Seeing that the Tickling Bird was preparing to launch the threatening attack just now, the Centipede King roared, "Gu! Gah!" Suddenly, the earth cracked open, and crimson light shone out from the cracks. Then, King Centipede's body was wrapped in red light, and grew bigger. The sky turned dark red, and several red clouds surrounded the centipede. The top of the king's head. Gigantamax. Really Galar. The body length of the scratching bird is between 8 and 11 meters, but it does not feel that long when hunting. I estimate that the body length data is measured by straightening the head and tail of the scratching bird. The slender neck and tail of the scratching bird it accounts for most of the length. For example, the fire dragon's body is quite straight from beginning to end, so its data is not significantly different from the actual appearance. Gigantamaxing, to put it simply, is the phenomenon that Pokémon will become huge in size within a certain period of time, and the moves used will also become Gigantamax moves, and some special Pokémon also have exclusive Gigantamaxes, get exclusive super moves. This phenomenon can only be carried out in areas with extremely high energy in Galar. In other words, this is a battle system exclusive to the Galar region. Seeing the Centipede King going to Dynamax also made Su Yi completely confirm that the area he was currently in was Galar. Whoa! Seeing that the opponent in front of him suddenly became huge, Chunyao suddenly panicked. What kind of cat is that? It suddenly became bigger than a large monster. Lu Kao looked up, dumbfounded. Gigantamaxing is a phenomenon we take for granted in games. When it becomes a reality and you witness it with your own eyes, it's really shocking. The huge Centipede King under the dark sky made Su Yi feel a full sense of oppression. Not counting those super large ancient dragons, there were only a few large monsters in the monster world that could match this size. Fight or retreat? Su Yi was a little unsure. The Gigantamax actually doesn't last long, but it's basically impossible to dodge the Gigantamax moves of the Gigantamax Pokémon, because those moves are overwhelming as soon as they are activated, so they can generally only resist forcefully. The best way now is to retreat, delay the Dynamaxing time, and then return to defeat it. However, this is the first battle with the Tickling Bird. Just like the first battle with the ferocious Jackal, Su Yi's command can establish initial trust with it, which allows him to better command these originally wild monsters in the future. But running away in the first battle will inevitably make the accompanying beasts feel a little unhappy. But compared to the momentary momentum, it is more important to prevent the accompanying beasts from being injured in vain. After all, failure will also disappoint the accompanying beasts. Su Yi took out the catching ball and pointed it at the bird. Tickling birds, us. Just when Su Yi was about to call out, a clear voice came from the sky. It's a Pokémon I've never seen before. What's wrong? Can't it become Gigantamax? Su Yi looked sharply at the sound. I saw a strong fire-breathing dragon flying in the air, and on its back, a dark-skinned purple-haired man looked at Su Yi with a smile. That's Dandy, the strongest champion of Galar, one of the 8 masters of the Pokémon World Championship. Su Yi was extremely surprised. Finally, he met a living person in the Pokémon world, and this was the first person he met. People are even more important. It would be a pity to end this wonderful battle hastily because we can't go to Gigantamax. Continue. Looking at Su Yi with a surprised expression, Emperor Dan took off his giant wristband and threw it over. Thanks. Su Yi came back to his senses, smiled slightly, stretched out his hand to lift the projector, launched his flying claws, grabbed the giant wristband and quickly hooked it into his hand. Oh, is there any such interesting equipment? Emperor Dan was very interested in the projector on Su Yi's left hand. This is the Gigantamax wristband. Su Yi quickly put it on. This is the key prop used by trainers to Gigantamax Pokémon. Will it become a giant? This trainer? Emperor Dan asked loudly. The one who responded to Dan Emperor was Su Yi's thumbs up. I've long wanted to try this kind of battle myself. Tickling the bird, are you ready to grow bigger? Su Yi grinned. Gah, Tickle Bird responded expectantly. The battle continues. Su Yi retracted the ball to scratch the bird, and held the capture ball in his hand. Then, the giant wristband released several dark red energy and injected it into the ball. Suddenly, the capture ball in Su Yi's hand kept changing. Large, and glowing with red and white streams of light. Come on, let's start our first giant battle. Su Yi struggled to throw a huge capture ball. Bang! The scratchy bird, covered in dark red energy, jumped out of the capture ball and continued to grow in size until it was about the same size as the Dynamax Centipede King. Gah! The scratching bird chirped excitedly with novelty. The tickling bird has gotten bigger, meow. Lu Kao danced excitedly. Dynamaxing and tickling birds. The king of battles tickles birds. Make your grand entrance. Googa. When the Centipede King saw that the scratching bird had also become gigantic, he took the lead to take action. Extremely acidic. The earth trembled, and a dark purple poisonous stream burst out from the ground. The torrent of poisonous energy formed a vortex and swept through the bird. At the same time, with the help of the giant move, the Centipede King's special attack increased. The scratching bird was constantly bumped in the poisonous vortex, its hands and feet staggered, and its skin was corroded by the acid and poison, leaving scars. Fight back fiercely, scratch the bird, giant rock. Su Yi shouted loudly. Gah! The scratching bird shook his head, and after getting rid of the strong discomfort caused by the extremely acidic poison, he slammed the ground with his sharp claws, then lifted up a huge rock slab from the ground and threw it at King Centipede. With a loud bang, the rock slabs collapsed like a building, pressing against King Centipede. Rocks flew and a sandstorm rolled up in the sky. Outstanding effect. King Centipede shook his body and screamed in pain. Its eyes showed unwillingness, and it chirped like insects. A bright yellow light bloomed all over its body. Countless insect attribute energy butterflies condensed and swarmed toward the birds like snow all over the sky. Su Yi's eyes moved, and he loudly ordered again, tickle the bird, and use the giant flying punch to blow the bug back. Gah! Tick Bird responded loudly, waving his claws, the airflow swept across, the wind spiraled, and the flying energy formed a huge tornado to face the giant insect GU. Oh, it's a good idea, can it succeed? Dan Emperor, who was sitting behind the fire-breathing dragon watching the battle, his eyes lit up after hearing Su Yi's tactics, and an expectant smile appeared on his lips. Boom boom boom. The wind surged, the insects chirped, and the two energies faced each other and collided violently. Googa! King Centipede was at a physical disadvantage, so he was the first to show his weakness. Go! Go for it! Go for it! Su Yi clenched his fists and encouraged loudly. Gah! Tickle Bird gathered all his strength and used all his strength. The giant flying storm surged again, suppressing, destroying and blowing away the giant insect GU. Bang bang bang! The Centipede King was hit by all the giant flying attacks that swept away the remaining giant insect GU. Finally, the giant energy dissipated, and the Centipede King continued to shrink in size and fell down while screaming. After the battle, the scratching bird returned to its original size, the dark red sky faded, and the sky and earth returned to their original colors. We win, meow! Lu Kao shouted happily. Victory! Well done! Tickling the bird. Su Yi rushed forward, hugged the bird's neck, and praised it without hesitation. The scratching bird hugged Su Yi with its paws and screamed happily. This battle allowed it to experience the joy of fighting, and it also initially recognized Su Yi's identity as a trainer. I'll leave it to you for the future battles. Su Yi clenched his fist and stretched out his hand. Wow, Ticklebird first tilted his head, then happily held his front paws and fist bumped with Su Yi. It's really good, the friendship between you. The fire-breathing dragon slowly landed, and Emperor Dan jumped off its back, applauding gently. Su Yi took off the giant wristband and handed it over. I was able to successfully defeat the giant centipede king and establish trust with my companions, thanks to the help of Mr. Dan Emperor. Dan Emperor put on the giant wristband and said with a smile, "It's just the icing on the cake. I'm very happy to see such an interesting battle." Looking at the centipede king lying on the ground without the ability to fight, Su Yi was a little confused. Should he conquer it? The main reason is that he is not very interested in the Pokémon King Centipede, and his capture balls are also relatively valuable now. Why don't you want to conquer it? Emperor Dan came over and asked. Actually, I didn't fight to conquer it, but because of the lucky eggs. Su Yi explained the reason for fighting the Centipede King. In order for the lucky egg to travel safely, do you want to defeat the evil Centipede King? Emperor Dan said with a smile. But I really don't want to capture it, and if I capture it, I have to be responsible for the Pokémon. Su Yi said, still taking out the precious capture ball. Hey, let's subdue it, lest King Centipede continue to do evil. Su Yi threw the capture ball to subdue him. At this time, those Pokémon who had been bullied by King Centipede cheered happily when they saw that King Centipede had been subdued. Those Pokémon ran over one after another and surrounded Tickle and Su Yi. Gah, wow, the bird was suddenly surrounded by a group of little guys. It was a little overwhelmed for a moment. One Pichu even climbed onto the back of the bird and interacted with it happily. Everyone is so enthusiastic. Su Yi was surrounded by a group of cuties, feeling a little at a loss. It seems they are very grateful to you. Emperor Dan looked at this scene with a smile. Seeing how enthusiastic these Pokémon were, Su Yi let go and reached out to slowly touch these real and lovely creatures. This is Pikachu's cheek. It's soft. Ah, it's a little numb. I'm sorry. Su Yi touched Pikachu's cheek curiously. Suddenly, 2 red dots flashed with lightning on Pikachu's cheek, which scared Su Yi. Yi quickly stopped and apologized, but Pikachu smiled indifferently and took the initiative to let Su Yi touch its head. Seeing Su Yi and Pikachu having so much fun, the Pokémon also started playing with Su Yi. It's a sticky treasure, it's wet and slippery, ha ha ha. Su Yi happily took a sticky treasure off his head. Tickbird, on the other hand, was running happily with a Pokémon on his back, causing the Pokémon dangling on his back to cheer and scream in excitement. This is Pokémon and people. This trip of getting lost was really worth it. I saw Pokémon that I had never seen before, enjoyed the great Dynamax battle that turned into Dynamax for the first time, and also witnessed people and Pokémon. The warm interactions between the dreams are everything I want to protect. Dandy sighed softly as if he had dispelled the fatigue of running around in recent days. Ouch, Charizard responded to Dan Emperor. Lucky Egg walked forward, and several Pokémon came over holding some fruits and handed them to Su Yi. Geely Egg said that this fruit forest was originally taken care of by these Pokémon. Without these fruits, they would have no food source, so they are very grateful to you, meow. Lu Kao translated. Even though this was their only food, in order to thank him, the Pokémon still chose to share it with him. Su Yi only picked out 4 orange fruits and threw them to Mau Mau, Ticklebird and Dandy respectively. These are enough. Su Yi returned the remaining fruits and smiled as he touched the Pokémon that handed them the fruits. Ouch! Mau Mau finished eating in 2 bites. The tickling bird eats the fruit and tastes it carefully. This is the fruit of its victory. A thank you gift from the Pokémon. Dandy looked at the orange fruit and then opened his mouth to bite it. It's very sweet. Su Yi tasted the sweetness and felt extremely satisfied. Let me formally meet you, Su Yi, the 5th phase hunter of the New World Investigation Team. Su Yi said with a smile. Su Yi and Lu Sao sat on the back of the scratching bird. The scratching bird ran lightly across a wetland grassland. Several voracious turtles submerged in the pool poked their heads out of the water warily. They saw Su Yi and his party walking away, and sank into the water leisurely. In the sky, a fire-breathing dragon carried Dan Emperor and led the way. After a while, the wetland grassland gradually turned into a wilderness with lush vegetation. Seeing this beautiful wilderness, Su Yi couldn't help but take a deep breath, and then shouted loudly. Several rocket finches flew into the sky, and several greedy chinchillas quickly climbed up the trees in shock. Although Dandy is prone to getting lost, fortunately his partner Charizard can't. Not far from the wilderness, a huge gym appeared in sight. Kaidao, Master Ma's martial arts gym. During the conversation with Emperor Dan on the road, Suyi finally confirmed his location. In the Galar region, Armor Island is an isolated island bought by Ma Shid, the former champion of Galar and the master of Dan Emperor. I didn't expect it to be here. Suyi and Lu picked up the bird and put it back into the ball. This is Master's martial arts gym. It's very grand, right? Dan Emperor looked at the main entrance of the martial arts gym and said with memories on his face. It's indeed very impressive. Suyi said, if you can buy an island, how can you say it's not impressive? And this island is also very unusual, with wilderness, wetlands, forests, caves, deserts, plains, beaches, and islands. There are different areas distributed on a small island. What kind of demon gathering land is this? Come on, let's talk after we go in. I'm sure the master will be interested in you too. Let's try Mistress Mai's cooking skills by the way. Dan Emperor said, opening the door expectantly. Master, I'm here to see you. Little Dandan, you are finally willing to come see me, old man. A hunchbacked old man wearing martial arts uniforms greeted Dan Emperor with a smile. Sorry, I was really busy before. Dandy scratched his head and said with a bitter smile. Ma Shid said with a smile, it is said that it is better for young people to be busy, but health is also very important. By the way, is this your friend? It's rare to see you bring friends to our place. Ma Shid looked at Suyi, who was wearing a strange outfit, leather hunter suit. Suyi was also sizing up the former champion. Although Ma Shid looked old, he looked very energetic when he spoke and smiled, especially his two white eyebrows that went down to his temples, which made him look quite kind. But in Pokémon Sword and Shield, when he gets serious about fighting, he will take off his jacket, revealing the training clothes he is wearing, and put on a martial arts posture with great energy, which can be said to be getting stronger with age. This is a long story. What about Master Mie? Emperor Dan asked. Ha ha ha, we have been preparing for a long time. Let's chat while eating. Ma Shid. After passing through the wide hall, everyone turned into a restaurant, where a mature woman with elaborate makeup was placing food on the table. Emperor Dan is here, Are there any guests? Me, Ma Shid's wife, said in surprise. Suyi said politely, sorry for disturbing you. Mi smiled and said, it doesn't matter, there will be more people eating and it will be lively. Where's little Hade? Emperor Dan asked without seeing Mai's son. He has eaten long ago and is resting in the room now. It is already past dinner time, our lost champion. Mi Yeshao teased. Sorry. Dandy realized then that Ma Shid and his wife were waiting for him to come back for dinner, but they were delayed because he was lost. This young man, are you a friend of Emperor Dan? It's rare to see Emperor Dan bring others to our martial arts gym. Mie asked. Suyi scratched his head and said, well, I am also the Dan Emperor who I just met and got to know, and I am on Armor Island simply because, well, I got lost. Lost? Ma Shid and me looked at Dan Emperor in surprise, and then at Suyi. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.